some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 10th of February. Today.
It is our now main working theory that ezedi has actually gone into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. All of our work thus far has not seen him come off the bridge.
Police believe the Clapham chemical attack suspect Abdul Ezedi is most probably dead as the Met searches the River Thames.
The Prime Minister earned more than £2 million last year, according to his tax returns. So we're asking, could he actually be out of touch with the public?
My memory is fine. Take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
Joe Biden pushes back against memory loss claims after an ally of the president says he suffered the worst day of his leadership.
Powers to ban pavement parking should be extended right across England. That's according to many councils around the country. Currently, it's only banned in London.
A medicinal marijuana firm found that their customer base has increased by 1,000% over the last year as the NHS patient waiting list continues to grow.
Good morning. Could it already be a red card for the blue card? One Premier League manager says plans to introduce a sin bin to football will destroy the game. There's news on the future of Gareth Southgate as England manager, and we look ahead to a huge weekend in the Six Nations.
A mixed weekend of weather to come. There'll be some rain, there'll be some showers, but there'll also be some sunny spells. Full details coming up in the forecast.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Now, I'm wondering, what's your favourite ever movie? Because there's, in the weekend supplement in the Mail today, their film critic has brought out the list of his 100 greatest ever movies.
Yeah, I don't know, if I'm perfectly honest. I'm not sure.
He says he's getting a bit fed up because it's his job as the film critic to go to so many movies and watch new movies coming out. And he says he sees so many nowadays that are quite good but instantly forgettable.
Yeah.
So he's sort of saying, what are the ones that you really think that are the best movies ever, and what would your top movie be?
But you see, he doesn't on his list here. He hasn't got Shawshank Redemption.
I know, and not Titanic either.
No, I've not seen Titanic, but Shawshank is phenomenal.
You've not seen Titanic?
No.
How can you have lived in the last 20-odd years without seeing Titanic?
Because I really wanted to see it, and when it was out, back in the late 90s, wasn't it? And someone said to me, oh, you should see it, it's really good, until Leonardo dies.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't help, does it?
And so I thought, well, if I know the ending, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah, I did that once to one of my children. They were watching I can't remember the movie, but it matters. The end matters. And I told him what happened at the end, and all of my sons went, "Oh, Mum!" And it ruined the movie. I mean, absolutely. But Brian Viner reckons the best, and this is a man's choice, I reckon.
Right, go on.
The best ever movie is The Godfather.
Haven't seen it.
Oh, no, you've got to see that.
Haven't seen it.
It's good, but it's a boys' movie, I think. And then, just to give you the first few, Wizard of Oz is number 2.
OK.
all right.
Yeah, I saw that when I was a child.
Yeah. Number 3 is Psycho, and I would agree. I think that is a
I haven't seen that.
brilliant movie.
I haven't said that's the one with the shower.
Yes!
No, I couldn't watch that. I wouldn't sleep for a week.
Oh, it's very, very good. It's better than you think. There's much more to the story than just the shower scene. Number 4 is Jaws.
Classic.
Yeah, it is.
Absolute classic.
And number 5, which is a real classic, and it's one of those feel-good movies, done so well, Some Like It Hot.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that.
Oh, you've got to watch it. It's black and white. And when I recommend that to my kids, they go, oh, black and white. They won't watch anything in black and white.
No.
Anyway, I'd love to know what your favourite movie is. I can tell you whether it's in here.
Casablanca.
One Flew Over the
Graduate.
Cuckoo's Nest is number 7, which always terrifies.
I mean, I haven't seen any
Lawrence
of
of
these.
Arabia, the epic David Lean movie. Wonderful. Number 9, The Graduate, which I thought was completely tiresome. Citizen Kane, which you're meant to watch, aren't you? Everybody says you should definitely watch Citizen Kane. It is a mega movie. Boring as what's it, I think. Bonnie and Clyde. Apocalypse Now. Doesn't do anything for me.
No, I had to say it, but I haven't seen any of these, really, apart from...
Brief Encounter, you must have seen.
I've not seen Brief Encounter.
Black and white.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs I've saw.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that's something.
Bambi I've seen.
What's a movie that you put on if you just want a feel-good afternoon in front of the telly? What would you put on?
Oh, something like Star Wars. Episode 4, 1977. It just doesn't age.
I don't think
Star Wars.
I don't think Star Wars.
It's absolutely classic. It's fantastic. And it's an easy watch. I don't like these ones where, like for a Sunday afternoon or whatever, where you get really worked up with it. Just an easy watch.
I mean a feel-good, yeah. The one I put on if I just want to relax and feel good and have a little giggle occasionally is Ratatouille.
Oh, the cartoony one.
Have you seen it?
Don't think so.
Oh, you've got to watch it. It's so clever and so brilliant and so feel-good. It cheers you up every time you watch it. What movie cheers you up? Or what do you think is your best ever classic movie? Love to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.com. Yeah.
Now, our main news this morning, it's a world away from anything feel-good, let me tell you, is that police are claiming the suspect in the Clapham chemical attack may have jumped into the River Thames as the manhunt continues for the 11th day. This is the Met Commander John Saville speaking yesterday.
The last 24 hours, we have meticulously been viewing all of the available CCTV in and around the Chelsea Bridge area. And we've also worked with Transport for London in accessing the CCTV from their buses. It is our now main working theory that ezedi has actually gone into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. All of our work thus far has not seen him come off the bridge. We are in contact with his family in order to pass that news on and to provide the necessary information and support for them, because, of course, I'm sure they will also be very worried about what's happened to him and what he has done.
Well, of course, all of this comes after officers raided 2 Tyneside properties on Thursday, which they thought at the time were connected to the attack. Ezedi is wanted for attempted murder after throwing what we now know is an alkaline substance on a woman and her 2 children and injuring, of course, 9 others.
Let's talk to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Morning, Peter.
Morning.
What do we make of this? Because I don't think I've ever heard this before, where they're saying, well, we think he's dead, but we don't actually know.
Then I'll clarify for you. Abdul Shakur Ezedi, an utterly worthless individual whose contribution to the UK was to create a legacy of victims of crime, is dead.
But you can't know that, can you?
He is dead. He went on to Chelsea Bridge. He was seen peering over the edge. There were a number of sightings. And this is one of those cases which, generally speaking, the public are not aware of, when negative CCTV sightings are very, very important. We've grown used to, in the last 20, 30 years, of seeing CCTV of criminals, of crime, and police appeals all being connected to a sighting of somebody. But in this case, because there have been no sightings of ezedi at either end of Chelsea Bridge during the time span when he went on and was seen to be looking over the edge, those negative sightings of him, in other words, he simply was not seen, has proved conclusively, in my opinion, that he has been claimed by old Father Thames. Now, rivers, seas and oceans can be very slow to give up their secrets. At this time of the year, the Thames is utterly unsurvivable. It is in full flow. We've had so much rain, and generally speaking, it's impossible to survive the Thames in July or August, let alone February.
All right, if that's the case, why has it taken the police so long to... I mean, they've had this CCTV evidence of him going onto the bridge for a good while now, so why has it taken so long to reach the conclusion that he hasn't come off it?
Because, of course, there have been no sightings, and the trawl of CCTV has been very thorough. What we need to remember is that various authorities like Transport for London, local borough councils and individual businesses, individual residences and the such like, all separately own their CCTV systems. So it's a very time-consuming and complex operation to view everything and come to a conclusive kind of decision upon this. The police, of course, because they are the Metropolitan Police, will have to leave open the possibility. So they're saying it's their working hypothesis. I, however, will do their work for them in saying he is dead.
There will be lots of people watching right now who may conclude that he may not be dead. He may have actually found somebody who was willing to take him off that bridge, put him in a van, drive across. I mean, he could be anywhere. That's what people would be thinking as well.
And I suspect people that are thinking that have possibly not spent a lifetime in law enforcement or reviewing CCTV images or spent many, many years trying to pursue fugitives. And I understand that. I think what is more relevant here, and is very unfortunate for the Metropolitan Police, is that so many people will not believe them because their reputation, of course, has been utterly shredded in recent years. Trust in the Metropolitan Police has utterly tanked in recent years, and understandably and rightfully so in many occasions. In fact, yesterday, with an irony which is almost inescapable, the Metropolitan Police were severely criticised for the way that they deal with victims of child sexual abuse. So on one hand, they're saying this investigation is virtually concluded, and yet on the very same day, they are coming in for yet more criticism on a completely different sphere of policing.
Are we going to get a legal declaration of death then? Because that matters, doesn't it?
It matters to the victims particularly, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And the really galling part of all of this for me is that Ezedi has escaped justice through his cowardly, vicious, wicked attack, then cowardly not being able to confront the consequences of his own actions. He has escaped justice. And so he joins a long list of criminal cowards who couldn't face the consequences, like Fred West, like Dr. Harold Shipman, people who murdered many, many people and couldn't stand a lifetime of incarceration. I sincerely hope, for the doubters, that his body washes up. But the River Thames is a vast body of water.
And very tidal as well.
In full flow. It's as dark as a casserole this time of year. And I just hope, in order for some conclusion, that a body is found, but he could easily have been washed out to sea by now.
OK.
It's such a terrible ending for the victims, I think, because they'll still be worried, particularly the woman he hurt so badly. Or you see, at what point do we stop saying he allegedly hurt? Because, I mean, we in this business say allegedly until somebody's been caught and tried and convicted. And at the moment, we still call him an alleged perpetrator of this terrible thing.
You may, but I am entirely confident that he will not rise like the man from Atlantis and sue me for saying his victim, who now lies in hospital still at the tender age of 31, possibly losing the sight in one eye, undoubtedly permanently disfigured, is the person with whom my thoughts rest.
And she'll never know, if they don't find a body or find him, she'll never really feel comfortable that he is dead, will she?
Well, I hope that in the fullness of time, firstly, a body is found, and secondly, she may be able to find some tiny crumb of comfort from that.
Oh, well. Let's hope there is a legal declaration, because you can't libel the dead.
I hope they find the body.
Yes. Well, the problem with the Thames is, Peter, and you'll know this, it's the silt a lot of the time, isn't it? People, it's why they say never jump into the Thames, because if you go into the silt, you just don't come back up again.
Yeah, and there is, of course, debris on the bottom of the Thames as well, and a closed body could hook onto something like that quite easily and remain there undiscovered.
Yeah.
Eek.
Oh, well, let's hope the secrets are given up by the Thames at some time soon, just to bring closure to everyone on that one. For now, Peter, thank you.
It's 6:14. The latest tax records have shown the Prime Minister earned over £2 million last year, which amounted to over £500,000 in tax.
Oh, yeah. Now, the documents revealed he paid an overall tax rate of 23% in the UK. Now, that's much lower than the top income rate that stands at 45%.
And this all comes as the country is facing a cost of living crisis, of course. And it does beg the question whether the Prime Minister could possibly be out of touch with the public, who are facing much worse times.
Let's talk to political consultant and strategist Peter Barnes. Morning to you, Peter.
Good morning.
I guess the issue with this, I mean, it doesn't look good in the sense that he's earned £2 million and only paid 23% in tax.
Yeah.
But it's not income in that sense, is it?
Yeah, no, so this is the thing. It's a problem of optics, which has been Rishi Sunak's problem for quite some time on this issue. This is the second time he's released his tax returns. It's something he pledged to do when he was running to be Conservative Party leader. It was actually first done by David Cameron all the way back in 2016, when his family was caught up in one of the, I think it was the Panama or the Paradise Papers situation. And I understand why they've done it. I think it's to kind of get out ahead of it before the general election, because this has been a constant attack on Rishi Sunak, that he's a very wealthy man and that he is out of touch with the general public. It makes sense to me, but like I said, it's one of those kind of stories that it's not going to come out of it very well.
This rate of tax? It's a particular sort of tax, isn't it?
Yeah, from what I understand, it's one of those situations where I'm not an accountant, so I don't want to say something that's not technically accurate, but a lot of it seems to be a tax on the wealth that he's created on top of wealth, and this seems to be capital gains, and it seems to be a big sticking point for a lot of people who are saying that he hasn't earned this money. And I've noticed that
his money has earned
this money. I know a lot of more left-wing Labour MPs. I think Clive Lewis was on the BBC just the other day attacking Rishi Sunak on this issue, calling for a wealth tax, which the Labour Party in certain elements have been calling for quite some time. But I don't really see that happening. Even if Keir Starmer does get into number 10, I don't see a wealth tax coming, because let's be honest, Keir Starmer is also an incredibly wealthy man. This has always been my point with this particular debate is, if we want to talk about money in politics, let's talk about money in politics. It annoys me quite a lot when we just start bashing a particular person or bashing a particular party just because one person is richer than the other. Let's be honest. The average backbench MP earns £85,000. That's twice the national average. If you're a minister, it's £118,000. That's 4 times the national average. Everybody in the House of Commons right now out-earns the average general public. And, you know, is that right? Is that wrong? I think it's a much bigger debate, but we've really got to be rather grown up about it, and it does annoy me when people can't say, oh, he's really rich, so he can't relate to people. I don't really go down that argument very much.
I mean, I have to say, I wasn't thinking about the percentage of tax he's paid. I was just thinking he's paid £500,000 in tax, which is actually a lot
of money, yeah. And let's not forget that £500,000 goes towards the NHS, it goes towards education, you know.
But J.K. Rowling paid a fortune.
An absolute fortune, yeah.
You think you could build a hospital with that?
Yeah, I think somebody worked out that you could build, I think it was like 12 schools or something like that. It was an incredible amount. And this is the thing that a lot of people forget about incredibly wealthy people. If you have a very simple tax code, it's easier just to pay the tax than to work around it. You know, you don't have to pay accountants, you don't have to kind of dodge the tax, as it were. And there's been a big call, particularly from the right, for a simpler tax system. Flatter tax. I'm not a big advocate of flat tax, but I do see the argument, and I do think a simpler tax code would probably bring in more revenue to HMRC, and I would like to see that happen. And looking at this from the political aspect, I mean, I think the Labour Party have said that they're going to release Keir Starmer's tax returns in due course, so we'll wait and see how long that happens, but I won't be holding my breath. But I think they will have to do it, because this is another accusation for Keir Starmer, and let's be honest, there's many members of the Labour front bench that are incredibly wealthy. You know, Emily Thornberry, for example, she has a multi-million-pound London property portfolio. Yeah, so let's, you know, her full title is Lady Noogie, so, you know, yeah, she is, yeah. You know, this is the thing, is that, you know, a lot of these people feign it.
It's rather on thin ice if there's too much criticism there, because actually all the... I mean, she'll probably have a hefty tax bill.
Yeah, exactly.
But it'll be CGT.
Oh yeah, and I think that this is the real thing that is really will take Rishi out at the knees, is the fact that it is more capital gains than earned tax, for want of a better phrase. But yeah, I have to admit this is going to be a bit of a headache, but I think it's going to be a bit of a short one. I think that obviously Parliament is now in recess. They've deliberately done it now, so it'll kind of just drift off, and then when they come back, it won't be a story. It'll be too old of a story for the Labour Party to attack on.
I just wonder what people think. Well, yes, exactly. And when we've talked about Rishi Sunak's wealth before, a lot of our viewers have got in touch and said, don't bang somebody down for being wealthy, because, you know, why bash
we all
wealth?
Want to be
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people
wealth.
forget that Rishi Sunak is the son of immigrants into this country. They were pharmacists. Yeah. He worked incredibly hard. He managed to get into Goldman Sachs, not a particularly easy company to get into. And yes, he made a lot of money out of doing it. But you have to look at the steps that he took to get there. And I do really hate that this country has really developed a kind of bash the rich attitude, and a kind of, we don't really like people to succeed very much. And this seems to drip into this idea that if you have a lot of money, then you aren't a good person. And I don't like that narrative, and I've seen it start to develop quite a lot recently.
Yeah, no, fair point. Peter, thanks very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
OK, well, let's find out what you do think of that. Please, gbviews@gbnews.com.
If you do want some more money, there's still plenty of time for you to grab your chance to win £18,000 cash in our Great British Giveaway. Here are the details you need.
This is your chance to win £18,000 cash in our very latest Great British Giveaway. Cash to spend on anything you like. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. What would you use that for?
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of February. Good luck.
Good luck with that. To help you pay your tax bill.
I do. Now, President Biden has pushed back against claims that he has an issue with his memory. Comes after a report revealed he apparently forgot the years when he was vice president, and indeed when his son died of brain cancer.
I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad, I let you speak. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. I did not share classified information. I did not share it.
With your ghostwriter?
With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not.
How convinced are you? Meanwhile, one of Biden's allies has come out to say he suffered the worst day of his presidency yesterday. And another said the situation was beyond devastating.
Let's talk to former advisor to the Bank of England, Roger Gewolf, who's here. Roger, good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Look, where are we with this? Because it seems pretty obvious to everyone that actually he's not in the best health, if we put it that way.
I think there's three issues here. The first is that you're right. I think he still needs the mental examinations that he's refusing to take, but doctors and Mr. Herr, the special counsel, pardon me, have said that he is not competent to stand trial for the classified information he was illegally in possession of. Now, somebody who can't go before a court and stand trial really shouldn't be running a country. There's pretty much no doubt about that. 76% of people in a very recent NBC News poll said he really shouldn't be president, really shouldn't, well, shouldn't have a second term. So that's the first issue. The second issue is the Democrats really have themselves in a pickle because they've got nobody. I mean, there is simply nobody. The British bookies, who are usually pretty right, they've got Trump on odds of 1 to 1. They've got Biden at 2.5 to 1. Michelle Obama is at 20 to 1. Nikki Haley at 33 something. I can't remember them exactly, but I mean,
do you
they're
think
all...
Michelle Obama is a possibility in any way at all?
Not really. She has no experience. I mean, you know, she has no political experience at running anything.
Well, she's always said she don't want it. She's never.
And she doesn't want it. But they're making a lot of noise about it. But I really don't think I don't think that's right. I don't really think they've got anybody. They should have been planning long ago, but they haven't. I think they're steadfastly committed to staying with Joe. I think that Barack Obama pulls a lot of his strings, and he's committed to keeping him there with those strings. And the third point is that how do you get rid of him? I mean, he is convinced he's doing a good job. There's nothing wrong with him. You can't say leave. He's only going to leave if he wants to leave. There's no way to... The days of the smoke-filled rooms with the kingmakers is long gone. You cannot get him out other than voluntarily.
I just feel, you know, and it's away from the politics of it all, just feel very sorry for him.
Oh, my goodness.
Because, you know, he's say what he will, it seems quite clear that he is, well, you know, showing his age. And there's anything wrong with that.
No,
but
there's
as you
nothing
say,
wrong with it, but he's
President of America.
Well, I mean, look, feel sorry for him. I feel actually more sort of admiration for him that he's fighting on. He spent 48 years waiting for this moment, suffered tremendous humiliation. The value to him as an individual of getting a salute from Marines as he boards Marine One, the chopper, you know, is not something he's going to give up easily.
No, but as you say, one term maybe would be the clear answer. If he's like this now, and we have seen, I know people were texting yesterday saying, well, you know nothing about mental health. Well, no, but it's what we're seeing, isn't it, on the screen, the mistakes he's made even in just
and
the last
he won't have a mental cognitive examination.
Yes, yeah. Can he be forced to take one?
No, you can't force him to do anything. And given that there's no contenders and that Kamala Harris would make a pretty poor president, it seems, her ratings are even lower than old Joe's. They have no leverage to force anything. If they had a JFK in the wings, they could force the issue, but they've got nobody. They've got Marianne, who her main claim to fame is that she's Oprah's spiritual advisor.
Oh, my Lord.
And one of her main planks is she wants Americans to cough up $100 billion to make restitution for slavery. And, you know, that's not going to sit very well. And then...
Sorry, just to sort of spring in there, a lot of the newspaper headlines this morning are saying that his recent performances, Biden's recent performances, his gaffes, which you could say may only get more frequent as we go into an election.
You're right.
It's opened the door to Trump. I mean, it's just plain sailing for Trump.
I think Trump was sailing plain before that, but it certainly opened the door. And I mean, Kamala Harris's ratings to be lower, and poor Marianne, actually in one of the recent primaries, came behind the box that said none of the above.
Oh. So well, that says it all.
So, you know, I mean, thank goodness that we're not talking about anything serious, just the leader of the free world.
Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty scary stuff.
It is scary.
But you're right, Anne. I mean, the evidence, and you too, Stephen, the evidence is there. Everybody can see it. But it's like being frozen. We can't do anything about it. He doesn't want to go. They can't get rid of him. He won't have the tests. You can't force him. It's a real pickle to be in. So he's basically, the Democrats are handing it to Trump.
There's one very famous cognitive test that apparently Donald Trump took a few years ago.
Oh, yeah?
And absolutely aced it. That's a few years ago.
Well, so he says.
So it's, yes. Yeah, you have to get 30 points. And
is that the one where he says, man, woman, TV,
Yeah,
child?
that's right. One of the tests is, I mean, you could have a go at doing it at home, is you count down from 100 down, minusing 7 every time. It's quite difficult because 7 is one of those numbers, isn't it? But just see how well you do, because that's what you have to do as part of this.
But I tell you, I've spent a bit of time with him, with Trump, and I mean, he's like a 50-year-old. He's so sharp, funny. He'd have you in stitches in 5 minutes. He's
like a 50-year-old.
Absolutely. He's like
well, I'll take that.
He's quite amazing. So I think between the two of them, there's no.
Would there be a presidential debate? Oh my goodness, would there be?
Oh my! Well, I don't think the Democrats would allow it.
They couldn't.
No, that would be actually. You know what? Taking what you said, Stephen, that would be cruel. That would be a cruel thing for Trump to do it.
Yeah, but they've got every right to ask for it.
Totally.
Oh, my goodness.
But there's so much evidence.
Yeah. OK, Roger, we're going to leave it there, but good to see you this morning.
Too.
Thanks very much indeed.
OK, at 6:29, let's find out what the weather has in store for you. Here's Aidan McGivern.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a cold start out there in Scotland, but it is turning milder from the south this weekend. A mix of rain, showers and some sunny spells. Some sunshine to begin the day across England and Wales, but frequent showers returning into Wales and the southwest by the afternoon, staying drier further east. Meanwhile, Scotland and Northern Ireland start cloudy, but some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, whilst the rain and hill snow continues to drive in across northeast Scotland, mostly turning back to rain by the end of the day. Feeling cold here, much milder elsewhere, back in the double figures widely away from central and northern Scotland. And that rain continues to drive into northeast Scotland during Saturday night. Snow confined to the tops of the mountains. Otherwise, for much of the UK, it's a blustery night with further showers or longer spells of rain moving in from the west, a lot of cloud cover, and as a result, for most, it is frost-free, temperatures staying in the mid to high single figures in many places. We start off Sunday with a lot of cloud, some mist patches around as well. Driest towards the east, some showers feeding in from the west, but as the day goes on, actually, an increased chance of the cloud breaking and at least some brighter interludes coming through. But always there'll be outbreaks of rain and showers feeding in from the west, drier to the east and mild across the board. Mid to high single figures in the north, 11 or 12 in the south.
Here's one for you. I just was saying while the weather was on. Should they stop people running for president or prime minister here, whatever, when they hit 70?
Yes, put an age limit.
Put an age limit on it. Now Roger just said
that's ageist.
Well, yes, it sort of is.
But maybe we need that, because maybe if you stopped people of Trump and Biden's age, you stopped them because it was against the law to do so, it would bring through younger talent. It would give a space for younger talent to blossom. Maybe. Or would it? Maybe it is because real talent now doesn't go into politics. Maybe if you're really young and talented, you go into business, and maybe it's business that drives the world now, not politics.
Oh, maybe. Let us know what you think. GB Views, gbnews.com.
Now, do you think the government should ban drivers from parking on the pavement? We'll be discussing that next. You're watching Breakfast on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of 3 abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
Now, next Monday, the Prime Minister is taking part in a special People's Forum live here on GB News. So over the course of an hour, he's going to take questions directly from the studio audience. So if you want to be part of that studio audience and put your questions to the Prime Minister, very easy way to get involved. You can scan the QR code you can see on your screen right now, and that will take you to, if you want to type it in manually, gbnews.com/PM. So register your interest today and you could be there with the Prime Minister on Monday.
And an added bonus is you'll get to meet Stephen as well.
Oh, yes. Well, yes.
You'll be there.
Is it a bonus? Of course it is.
Of course it is.
And we'll be best shoes for you. Which is what I was thinking on the drive down this one. I thought, I'm going to have to polish my shoes.
Yes, because they'll be
in shot.
Yeah, they'll be in shot this time. Yeah, you can't just wear your trainers.
Trainers,
Not to meet the PM.
No.
No.
Or to meet you.
True.
Very smart.
Now, how about this one? A report that's published by several councils says that powers to ban pavement parking should be extended across England to make streets safer.
Yeah, the LGA, the Local Government Association, says wheelchair users, older people and people with pushchairs are often having to navigate around vehicles mounted onto the curb.
The study recommended that pavement parking be banned across England, London currently being the only area that does actually implement this measure already.
Let's talk to travel journalist Christian Walmart. Morning to you, Christian. Whereas I can see the sense in it, if people are taking up the whole pavement, just mounting the curb sometimes is the only way to avoid your car being smashed.
Then obviously there should be a yellow line or double yellow line there, and you should find somewhere else to park. Look, this is very sensible. I mean, I've seen terrible kind of footage of people pushing young children in pushchairs, having to go into the roads, risking life and limb. Pedestrians don't get very much space anyway. In a lot of places, there is barely a pavement for people. It's very narrow. And this really seems a no-brainer. Cars are for roads, and pedestrians are for pavements are for people.
Yeah, but look, with various shots now, I mean, that we're showing, if you're listening on the radio, you can imagine, I mean, the one set of wheels on the curb, well, that doesn't really restrict anything, does it, for pedestrians?
Well, it suggests that the road isn't very wide, and therefore it's unsuitable for cars to be parked. And, the shots, I realise people who are listening on the radio can't see this, but the shots kind of show that there's very little room for people to squeeze through. Look, in London, this has been law for quite a long time, and it has been a great relief for a lot of people kind of using the pavements. I mean, I really think this is a no-brainer. I don't even understand why there's a debate about it. In fact, there has been consultation in Parliament about this a few years ago, and the results have not yet been published. The government is obviously scared of, being seen to be waging a war on the motorist. But in fact, I think they ought to be waging a battle for the pedestrians.
Well, yes. I mean, pavements are for pedestrians and it's the roads that are for cars. Isn't the problem that these councils who may be calling for this, they just don't look after motorists properly? There aren't enough proper, safe places to park your car.
Well, there's limited road space, and that's an issue. A lot of towns and villages were not built at a time when everybody owned cars, and therefore there's a scramble for places. But, this is something that has a wider kind of resonance because, essentially, we are too car dependent. Too many people kind of just get in their car automatically without a thought as to the wider effects of it. And one of those effects is the fact that it's, limited down to space for parking. And, should they therefore really be using their cars in those circumstances? Should they use some other method of transport? So it's a part of a kind of wider debate. But, I think it's pretty unfair to expect pedestrians to be pushed into the road in dangerous situations just to allow people to park their cars wherever they want.
Christian, good to see you this morning. Let us know what you think about that. gbviews@gbnews.com. I don't think pedestrians, and particularly I've got friends who are wheelchair users, and they shouldn't be forced into the road. Of course not. But if you just mount one set of wheels on,
Is that really so bad?
I do it all the time, I've got to be honest.
Do you?
I didn't know. I don't live in London. I don't come to London really very often unless I'm working. So I had no idea you couldn't do it in London. I had no idea it was illegal here. I do it all the time, but I never block a pavement.
I think councils should look after motorists a bit better. There are never enough car parks, and where there are, they're ridiculously expensive, and the councils just seem to look upon them as a way of just getting more money. I think you've got to look after motorists as well. Cars are with us.
Let us know what you think on that one. In the meantime, Aidan's here. Morning.
Good morning to you both. Good to see you.
Yeah, what have you got for us today, Aidan?
Blue cards.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
We already have red cards, we already have yellow cards, and yesterday we saw the Premier League, the big beasts of the Premier League managers, among the Premier League managers, responding to what they consider to be the travesty of the reintroduction of blue cards. Well, look, I'll give you some of the quotes first of all. Big Ange Postecoglou at Tottenham was first out of the blocks yesterday morning. He said it will destroy football. Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, leaving at the end of the season, as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, he said it gives referees more opportunities to fail. He thinks their workload is already too high. You're adding another layer of bureaucracy in a way because it has to be dealt with on the pitch and you don't have much time to do it. We already talked too much about VAR, and so we're adding another layer of problems on top of what the referees already have to deal with. Mauricio Pochettino, the Chelsea manager, says, I'm a romantic and I think it will be difficult. Other managers had their say as well. Now, what this is for is there's a belief between some people within the game, especially at the higher echelons of the game at IFAB, the rule makers, who believe that sometimes the yellow card is too weak for some offences, sometimes the red card is too harsh. Now, there's an intermediary level, which would be for dissent and cynical fouls. So it seems a bit harsh sometimes for a red card for a referee to just say, right, you're off. A yellow card seems too weak. You can spread the offences around the team. So my problems with it are, I don't think it's been thought through. If you look at goalkeepers, for example, you can't send off a goalkeeper for 10 minutes because you're not going to allow a goalkeeper to replace that goalkeeper for 10 minutes and then sub them back off. It's not going to happen because it just not allowed in the rules. You have one goalkeeper in the game. You can't sub a player back on and then you can't sub a player on and then back off.
But the whole idea of the blue card is that you don't sub them.
No, you don't. But you can't just remove your goal. You can't without a goalkeeper, which is not going to happen. No. So what happens is does that mean the goalkeeper can just?
Interesting, wouldn't it?
Does that mean the goalkeeper can just say what he wants and get away with it? And so the different rules apply to him compared to the other 10 players on the pitch. Second point, what happens about the timing?
Yeah, what happens? Wouldn't that apply for the red card for a goalkeeper as well? Can you not give a goalkeeper
No. Yes,
card?
You can give a goalkeeper a red card, but then you can take off an outfield player and bring on a substitute goalkeeper. Okay. Or you can put an outfield player in goal, I suppose.
That would apply with a blue card then, wouldn't it? You'd have to apply the...
No, you can't bring a sub on and then sub a sub off. So you can't swap them in and swap them out unless they make an adaptation for the rules. I don't know. This is why I don't think it's been thought through. Right. And the timing as well. What happens if it's in the 97th minute and then a player's sent off for 10 minutes? Where's the punishment? They're not going to extend it 10 minutes just because someone's off the pitch. And are blue cards subject to VAR reviews? Goodness me, if they are, when we're going to be talking about another 20 minutes, aren't we?
Oh, well, there you go, Aidan. I thought it was a good idea yesterday.
Did you? Good idea, yeah.
No, I'm not. Did Paul Coy think it was a good idea?
I don't know.
Because it might just encourage a bit of more decent behaviour.
Respect. You're too into your respect, you two.
Right, Aidan,
well, we're sure you don't respect at all and say, that's it, thanks very much, Aidan. Because we're running short of time.
You're sending me to the sin bin, aren't you?
Yeah, we are.
An hour. Coming up, why are British firms choosing foreign workers over British workers? We'll find out in the paper review in just a moment.
Afternoon Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
OK, this is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. Good morning to you. Should we go through the papers this morning?
Yes, let's.
Because we have 2 wonderful guests with us this morning, Benedict Spence and Emma Wolfe. Good to see you both. Emma, let's start with the front of the Times, should we? Yes. Tax cuts. The PM's talking tax cuts.
Yes.
Which I don't understand, because a couple of weeks ago we were promised tax cuts in March, and then last week they seem to be rowing back on it, and now they're back on.
What a surprise. I mean, we do have an election coming, and guess what? The Prime Minister is telling us the economy is going to get better. He's saying a vote for the Conservatives will be a vote for lower taxes. A combination of tax cuts and falling mortgage rates is going to make everybody in Britain feel much better. We're facing an economic gear shift. It's all going to be fine.
Oh, I like that.
Of course,
economic
he's not.
Gear shift.
Of course, there's no real meat on the bones. I mean, let's wait and see exactly. Let's wait and see for March, and let's see what the spring budget actually gives us. But in this interview with the Times, of course, he wants people to feel good and to feel positive. Basically, the truth is they're desperate about this 25-point poll lead of Labour, and, you know, he'll promise anything at the moment.
And tax cuts make such a neat headline, doesn't it?
Of course it does.
It does. I suppose it must be very frustrating if you're Rishi Sunak, because the Labour Party isn't, I think, enthusing too many people, and he is sort of throwing everything he can find at the wall to try to get that dial to shift in terms of opinion polls, and it's just not working. And I think that that's just a reflection of, frankly, how fed up a lot of people are at the performance of this government, that they think to themselves, well, you could offer me significant tax cuts and I'm still not going to vote for you. A really wonderful endorsement for the last 14 years. As we get closer to a general election, as and when that may be, you might start to see it narrowing, because I think obviously more focus will be placed on the Labour Party. To be honest, they haven't had quite so much scrutiny up to now, but I think, as Emma says, he could offer you absolutely anything, and a lot of people would go, that sounds very nice, I don't trust you to deliver it.
I think that's it. I think people have simply lost trust, lost faith, lost patience, and almost are completely exhausted with this Conservative government. And also, we can't ignore the fact that Sunak has had a lot of disasters over the last few months, over the last year or so. It hasn't been plain sailing. All the fiasco about Rwanda, all of that. You know, people are absolutely fed up. And when they look at their lives and who's in power, they don't feel good. We're poorer than we were, you know, at the beginning of his tenure. Getting poorer, it seems, even though we're being told, oh, the economy's on the up, economic gear shift, good times they are coming.
I mean, live in hope.
Well, the
Live in
spring is
hope.
coming. I think that is a good thing, but that's got nothing to do with Rishi Sunak.
It'll be very interesting for you on Monday night when you host the People's Forum, where people will be able to put their points to Rishi, whether people who've naturally come from GB News audience, and you might expect to be more, not deferential, but at least conservative-leaning, it will be very interesting to see whether they're hostile towards him or not, won't it?
Oh, it will, but also priorities. That's what he needs to take away from this, is really understanding priorities.
But when you make pledges and you don't deliver on any of them, it's so easy to just sling mud at them.
It's very tricky, though, because actually where do natural Conservative voters go? There's all this talk about the Reform Party creeping up in the polls, doing very well. But actually, we've seen this before with insurgent right-wing parties, is that there's this great scare that they're going to disrupt the Conservative Party. And then, at the last minute, people get into the voting booth and they think, but I don't want to let Labour in. So they do end up voting Conservative.
I know, but also I think there's going to be the low turnout thing at this election.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, as you say, homeless Conservatives who can't quite bring themselves to do the reform thing and let Labour in by the back door and just think, do you know what? I will not vote for either of the two main parties.
Yes.
Yeah,
I wonder.
Well, we shall see. What's going on in the Church of England, Benedict, according to The Guardian? PCC meetings getting out of control?
Yes, I can't imagine what it is that they're getting so irate, but apparently raised voices, banging on tables, language isn't quite up to standard, and now there's a suggestion that they're going to have to sort of introduce a code of conduct for people, which might see people expelled. And I just think... The Church of England has been in the news for not great reasons in the last couple of weeks, surrounding limited but nonetheless present examples of migrants claiming to convert and then perhaps not being quite as Christian as they might have been. There was another example, actually, in the Times today of a man who couldn't be deported back to Iran because he got a Christian tattooed onto himself in prison or something like that.
Clever.
Yeah, it is rather clever. It's rather difficult to hide. I don't know if we do sort of a state-sponsored tattoo removal as part of our general removal programme. But it's things are not. Times are not great in the Church of England. Especially when you.
So obviously
also,
people are losing their temper and they're banging their fists on tables.
And at the same time, we hear that, numbers are down in congregations. That's enough to get any parish priest quite irate if he can't actually fill his congregation, let alone the people who do.
And wasn't there that astonishing figure that 26% of baptisms last year were on migrants?
Yes, this is... It's clearly
that's quite a lot.
It's clearly something that has got round, not unlike when people discovered, there's this thing called the Modern Slavery Act, and you can get round deportation by claiming that you're a victim of modern slavery. People are not stupid. They do find a few things out about the countries that they move to and the systems in place. But this is ultimately, though, I talk about sort of falling congregations. That's where the future of Christianity is. It's not in the developed world. It's in the third world, and it's people moving from Africa and the Middle East. That is where people are being converted, or in the case of sub-Saharan Africa, that's where they are to begin with. So, from the Church of England's perspective, you can understand why they actually are very in favour of bringing people over.
Figures up.
Absolutely. Bums on seats.
Astonishing. Emma, the Daily Express front page. You can't help wondering whether they've put it on the front page because that's what Daily Express readers really want to read, that Rishi is going to welcome Boris Johnson back.
This one has been swirling around for a few days, and I think it's more a case... Well, there are two things. Firstly, canny politicians. I think last week we were saying the same about Nigel Farage. The next day, he was at the Popcorn launch saying, no, I wouldn't rejoin the Conservatives. It's one of those... Canny politicians don't rule out anything, do they? Why would he rule anything out? They don't rule anything in, they don't rule anything out. They say, of course, I'd be open to. This thing about Boris Johnson possibly making a return to frontline politics... Sunak has spoken to him in the past few months. That's hardly a kind of, discussing your imminent new appointment at the top of the government at all.
Yeah, but to be fair, we didn't know Rishi Sunak was chatting up David Cameron for the foreign job.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. Although I think there was an awareness that Cameron wanted to come back, wanted to do something, and that they got on well.
So would Boris Johnson like being elevated to the House of Lords, maybe?
Look, I don't know. I think Boris Johnson would adore that. I mean, Boris Johnson would absolutely...
That's really the only way he could
Boris Johnson in Ermine, yes.
It seems quite unlikely, given what he's doing now, that he would want to return as a sort of, backbench MP.
He wouldn't want to be a
Whether or
backbencher, and he wouldn't necessarily want to be under someone else's leadership.
That's what I mean. Would he want to just do the work of an MP, or would he want something really, really quite significant?
Well, he couldn't be an MP in time, could he? So he'd have to be Lord Johnson, wouldn't he? Lord Boris.
Unless you were promising him a safe seat at the next election, and that's part of the spin, is to say to the electorate, I'll bring him back.
How do you time that in time?
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think Boris Johnson would want to be tied to a sinking ship. He likes to portray himself as a winner, and Rishi Sunak is going to lose. Ultimately, also, I just think when it comes to Sunak, we had this also, you mentioned Cameron, but it also transpired he'd been talking to Dominic Cummings quite a lot. It does seem to me it's just any name that can be thrown out just to see what the response is. But the key thing is, and I know GB News viewers generally quite like Boris Johnson, we can't forget, actually, the mess that Rishi Sunak inherited was largely Boris Johnson's mess. That polling had been going down and had hit quite a nasty point on Boris Johnson's watch. Very popular with a lot of Conservatives, but with the general public, I think a lot of that stardust had gone with Boris Johnson.
Yeah, we do seem to be in a situation where politicians are quite Marmite. Certainly on the Conservative side.
Yeah.
I mean, less Marmite on the Labour side, but that's because no one really knows quite what they're standing for at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. In the Conservatives, at least we have some figures that people do recognise and do know. It's really, really hard if you talk to the general public to get them to identify. I mean, Rachel Reeves, for example, our potential Chancellor in a few months, she wouldn't be identifiable. Really, Keir Starmer is not that identifiable to many, many British people in this country, who's the leader of the opposition. And
mind you, I have to say, I was somewhere yesterday and I was saying, I'm doing this thing on Monday with the Prime Minister, and she did say to me, well, who is the Prime Minister?
Wow.
So that's a good question. Who is the Prime Minister, mentally speaking?
I mean, we know that we've got two of the blandest men at the top of politics. I often think, is this the best we've got? But then I think about America.
Yes.
Biden and Trump, the best they've got out of a population of hundreds of millions.
Apparently so.
It's very
If you're
odd.
American, you've got to make a choice.
You have. OK, Emma, Benedict, thanks very much indeed. Back with those two a little bit later on. But here's Aidan with your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a cold start out there in Scotland, but it is turning milder from the south this weekend. A mix of rain, showers and some sunny spells. Some sunshine to begin the day across England and Wales, but frequent showers returning into Wales and the southwest by the afternoon, staying drier further east. Meanwhile, Scotland and Northern Ireland start cloudy, but some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, whilst the rain and hill snow continues to drive in across northeast Scotland, mostly turning back to rain by the end of the day. Feeling cold here, much milder elsewhere, back in the double figures widely away from central and northern Scotland. And that rain continues to drive into northeast Scotland during Saturday night. Snow confined to the tops of the mountains. Otherwise, for much of the UK, it's a blustery night with further showers or longer spells of rain moving in from the west. A lot of cloud cover. And as a result, for most, it is frost-free. Temperatures staying in the mid to high single figures in many places. We start off Sunday with a lot of cloud, some mist patches around as well. Driest towards the east, some showers feeding in from the west. But as the day goes on, actually, an increased chance of the cloud breaking and at least some brighter interludes coming through. But always there'll be outbreaks of rain and showers feeding in from the west, drier to the east and mild across the board. Mid to high single figures in the north, 11 or 12 in the south.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has made her much-anticipated appearance before the Scottish COVID inquiry today. It comes after allegations emerged that she deleted key pandemic WhatsApp messages, used the pandemic to push her own political agenda. But let's just cast our mind back, shall we, to August 2021, when Sturgeon was asked if she'd hand over all her WhatsApps to the inquiry. Here we go.
I think if you understand statutory public inquiries, you would know that even if I wasn't prepared to give that assurance, which for the avoidance of doubt I am, then I wouldn't have the ability. This will be a judge-led statutory public inquiry.
Which, for the avoidance of doubt, I am. OK. Well, you weren't, were you? But fast forward to today, and she was much less forthcoming.
WhatsApp messages between yourself and Mr Yusuf and Ms Lloyd were produced by you. Where did you get them?
They were provided to me through the Scottish Government.
But did you delete them?
Yes.
Did you consider yourself, against that background and your considerable ministerial experience, to be precisely the right First Minister for the job?
No, that's not how I would have thought of it at all. There's a large part of me wishes that I hadn't been.
All right, then. I'm joined now by Tory MP Lee Anderson. Lee, are those just crocodile tears?
Well, it looks like crocodile tears to me, Patrick. I mean, first we had the missing camper van. Nobody knows where that is. Now we've got this nonsense. We've got these burner phones, dodgy £5 phones from wherever they bought them from, WhatsApp messages going missing. It all looks a little bit dodgy to me. I mean, she's bleating on there, she's crying on screen. This is not cutting no ice. You know, it's crocodile tears. It makes you wonder what the SNPs are all about, Patrick. It looks... I mean, the people that have burner phones, let's be clear, people that have these dodgy phones where you can't trace them and disappearing WhatsApp messages, these are normally criminals, these are drug dealers. And you know what? These SNPs are no better than criminals.
Good morning to you. 7 o'clock, Saturday, the 10th of February. Today.
It is our now main working theory that ezedi has actually gone into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. All of our work thus far has not seen him come off the bridge.
Police believe the Clapham chemical attack suspect, Abdul Ezedi, is most probably dead as the Met searches the River Thames.
The Prime Minister earned more than £2 million last year, according to his tax returns. So we're asking, could that make him out of touch with the public?
My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
Joe Biden pushes back against memory loss claims after an ally of the president says he's suffered the worst day of his leadership.
Powers to ban pavement parking should be extended right across England. That's according to many councils. Currently, apparently, it is only banned in London.
Medicinal marijuana firm has found their customer base has increased by 1,000% over the last year as the NHS patient waiting list grows.
Good morning. We look ahead to a huge weekend of Six Nations rugby as England hosts Wales at Twickenham. There's also news on the future of Gareth Southgate as England manager, and it's Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas.
A mixed weekend of weather to come. There'll be some rain, there'll be some showers, but there'll also be some sunny spells. Full details coming up in the forecast.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News. We were asking an hour ago, what's your favourite movie? Because the Mail has brought out a big weekend supplement talking about the 100 greatest movies ever and where you can watch them. Godfather, they put at number 1, which I've always thought is, I mean, a good movie, obviously, but very much a boys' movie.
I've been looking through the list to see which ones I know. There's loads I haven't seen. But actually, fantastic. John in Northumberland says, best film, 2001, A Space Odyssey. Now, that really is superb.
Yeah.
Stanley Kubrick.
And a game changer, wasn't it? As well?
Oh, yeah.
Patricia says, Gone with the Wind. Absolutely. I hope they never remake it because it's still utterly brilliantly shot.
Yeah.
Bob says The Hunt for Red October. Have you seen that one? I love that movie.
No, I haven't. But you see, I read all the books, all the Tom Clancy's. I love the Tom Clancy's. And
so have you read it?
Yeah.
Hunt for Red
But the book, it's so long.
Oh, no,
so obviously the movie's
brilliant.
Cut loads of it out. So
Teresa in Cambridge says Witness, which is brilliant, and In of the Sixth Happiness. Also, she says, I love watching old black and white movies on a wet Saturday afternoon. Well, I think you're probably going to get a wet Saturday afternoon, too. So good luck with that.
Patrick in Birmingham says Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. Brilliant plot and fantastic performances from Laurence Olivier, Joan Fontaine and Judith Henderson.
Absolutely brilliant movie. Again, black and white, if you can stand it. And Julian Andover says The Dam Busters. Again, I love one of those old-fashioned black and white war movies. Brilliant. Mary Poppins, says Robin.
Yeah.
The Money Pit with Tom Hanks. Fabulous movie. Very, very funny. Particularly if you're into owning a property and doing it up.
Oh, right.
I
see.
It's called The Money Pit. Yeah. It's absolutely fun. That's from Annie and Stan in the Isle of Wight. Good morning.
Talking of money and spending it, on the PM's tax thing, Jan says, I think Rishi being so rich has its advantages. It proves he's in the job because he wants it. He's not there for the money, which is true. And Margaret Thatcher never took a salary.
Is that right? I didn't know
for
that.
PM, yeah, she never took PM salary.
Oh, she lived off her husband.
Yeah. Well, he had plenty of money, didn't he?
Well, he certainly did. Yeah, that's interesting. I must have known that at one point.
You must have done,
I've forgotten it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We were talking about politics as well, and why so many people feel that there aren't very many talented or suitable people at the top of politics anymore. And we were wondering whether that's because if you're young and talented, and you've got it, you've got that. Yeah, you could be a politician. Why don't you go into politics? Maybe it's because you go into business. And maybe it's business that runs the world nowadays. Martin says, age or talent has nothing whatsoever to do with anyone in American politics. The fact is, the position of president is dependent on your bank balance. And here in the UK, it's dependent on your personality.
Well, there's a lot in that.
There's no doubt you can't run for president without being able to raise billions almost of dollars.
It doesn't sit right with me.
No.
Just a quick one on parking on the pavement. We're saying it's only law in London that you can't do it at the moment. Marion says, actually, it's now the law in Scotland since the start of this year.
Oh.
So there you go. Nicola Sturgeon's put a foot down as well.
Oh, so what do you think?
Oh, no, it's not Nicola Sturgeon anymore, is it? It's Humza Yousaf.
Yes, that's right.
There you go. I shouldn't blame Nicola for everything.
No, even though lots of people do. OK, it's 7:05 to our top story right now. Police claim that the suspect in the Clapham chemical attack may have jumped into the River Thames. The manhunt continues and we're now in the 11th day. This is the Met Commander John Saville speaking yesterday.
The last 24 hours, we have meticulously been viewing all of the available CCTV in and around the Chelsea Bridge area. And we've also worked with Transport for London in accessing the CCTV from their buses. It is our now main working theory that ezedi has actually gone into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. All of our work thus far has not seen him come off the bridge. We are in contact with his family in order to pass that news on and to provide the necessary information and support for them, because, of course, I'm sure they will also be very worried about what's happened to him and what he has done.
Well, all this comes after officers raided 2 Tyneside properties on Thursday, thought to be connected to the attack. Ezedi wanted for attempted murder after apparently throwing an alkaline substance on a woman and her 2 children and injuring 9 others in the process.
Well, joining us now is former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley. Thanks for joining us again. I mean, what do you make of this? Is this the police saying we can't find him, so we're going to conclude that he must have jumped in the river, which doesn't seem very satisfactory?
It most definitely is not that. The police have done a very exhaustive and thorough job in analysing the CCTV. We've seen images released in the last few days of how ezedi crossed Westminster Bridge, Vauxhall Bridge, and then some 4 hours after the attack in Clapham, he's seen going on to Chelsea Bridge. And with the help of CCTV images from London Transport buses, he's seen peering over the edge. What is really important and really crucial about all of this CCTV analysis is that ezedi is not seen leaving Chelsea Bridge after he's seen peering over the edge. So the conclusion that the Met have come to, and their working hypothesis, as they call it, is that ezedi went into the water. I'll go a step further than that and say, undoubtedly, Abdul Shakur Ezedi is dead.
Why are you so certain, but the Met won't say it? I know you've got decades of experience behind you, Peter. Is that what it is?
Yes, that does go some way towards my thinking. If we look at Ezedi's movements prior to getting to Chelsea Bridge, when he's seen walking in other parts of London, he seems to be almost walking quite quickly with some degree of purpose, perhaps. And then when he gets to Chelsea Bridge, it's almost like the pace drops and there's a more possibly contemplative sort of manner to how he moves around, almost in a sort of confused kind of manner. Whereas previously it seems like he was aware of where he was walking to. It seemed with a drop of pace that he might have been in a very contemplative mood. I think quite possibly since the attack, his movements were haphazard. When he got an underground train to North London, bought what I had imagined then was a very much needed bottle of water, travelled to East London, well, to Tower Hill, which again, on the embankment of the River Thames, and then moves around. What was he thinking? I think quite possibly for some time. He realised not only the consequences of his utterly appalling actions, but what a dark future he faced, which would have been inevitable arrest, charging, and a criminal trial.
And you can conclude, I suppose, that his state of mind must have been very bad when he made the attack. And I'm going to say the word allegedly because I'm just trained to, allegedly made that attack. But and the police have said this from the beginning, and you can see it from the CCTV images. He clearly burned himself quite badly over his right eye, I think it was, wasn't it? And that must have been a very, very painful burn too. So that must also have affected his state of mind.
Undoubtedly. And let's remember, on the day of this cowardly, wicked, vindictive attack on a 31-year-old woman who remains seriously ill in hospital, who may lose the sight of an eye and will undoubtedly have lifetime disfigurement, 2 children attacked, members of the public, good Samaritans, the real ray of light in this story, how those courageous residents of Lesser Avenue ran to those who were in need, and 5 police officers, all injured, thankfully much less so than the main victim, by this corrosive substance. Ezedi set off very, very early that day and travelled almost through the night in possession of a very corrosive substance that was going to be used on an attack. He knew what he was doing. He plotted, he planned it, he carried it out. I'm sure he didn't anticipate getting injured himself, but thereafter, the futility of his position must clearly have dawned on him, and the only conclusion to be reached is that he is now dead, courtesy of entering Old Father Thames.
OK. Peter, thanks very much indeed. Now, the latest tax records have shown the Prime Minister earned more than £2 million last year, and that means he's paid more than £500,000 in tax.
Well, the documents revealed that he paid an overall tax rate of 23% in the UK, which is much lower than the top income rate that stands at 45%.
Of course, it raises questions because we're all facing a cost of living crisis. So is the Prime Minister out of touch with the public because he earns so much money?
Maybe there are many members of the public who resent how much money he's made. Joining us now is political author Owen Bennett. A very good morning to Owen. Do you think people will resent his wealth? Or, as one of our viewers has already pointed out, he is so wealthy he doesn't have to be Prime Minister. He's choosing to be Prime Minister because he's dedicated to the job.
I think that Rishi Sunak being rich is not news, right? I think people knew this going in. People have always known this about Rishi. He was trying to hide it, and then suddenly it came out. You know, he tried to play up some sort of working class man of the people card, and then this came out. It would have some sort of impact. But I don't think people. I think in this country, you know, we like people who get on. We like people who've earned money. We like people who are, you know, financially successful. the big thing is the taxes, right? Is he paying enough taxes? That's the thing that people are going to be looking at. You know, the fact that he's made a lot of his money through capital gains, which hasn't gone up, capital gains tax, whereas income tax, because he's frozen the threshold, effectively has gone up. That's the kind of bit that Labour and the opposition could perhaps get Rishi on. It's, you know, are you making these tax arrangements in the budgets to suit you and your friends, or are you thinking about the wider people? But I think the fact that he in of himself is wealthy, I don't think the British people will hold that against him.
No, but interesting you raised your CGT, capital gains tax. Surely no one can in their right mind actually say, look, the tax laws in this country, which have been around for a long time, tweaked here and there, but the basic principles have been the same for a long time, that is being manipulated to suit the Prime Minister. I mean, no one can think that, surely.
No, I don't think people would be saying that, but what people would be saying perhaps is, who are you surrounding yourself with? So if you're surrounding yourself with lots of people who go, actually, we need to keep the capital gains tax frozen because that will help keep the economy going, that will keep more money in the economy, that kind of thing, and that's the way you'll lean. Whereas if you're surrounded by people who perhaps are slightly more in touch with lower income families who would say, actually, it's the tax threshold which need your attention. You know, you've frozen them, can you increase them and give more money to people that way? It sort of goes back slightly to the inheritance tax debate as well. It's a similar thing. If you've got an estate that you're going to pass on, then you don't think that should be taxed at such a high rate. Whereas if you haven't got any particular property or inheritance to handle down, you'll think that's where the tax should be. So it's a matter of where the emphasis is on these slight tweaks to the tax changes that I think would be the area of attack. If you were the opposition, you could say, well, the fact that you paid an effective 23% rate shows that that's where your concern is. You're not on the side of people who are on lower income. That would be the attack, I imagine.
It may not become an election issue, for instance, though, because Labour themselves have a host of very wealthy people, even on their front benches, and particularly their leader.
I mean, this is exactly right, isn't it? If you start throwing this around, you don't know. I mean, okay, I guess you do know who amongst your top team who's earning a bit of money and who's not, but then you don't know who on the back benches, you don't know who on the House of Lords. So before you know it, it only takes, to find one example in your own party. I mean, Tony Benn, the great hero of the left, he arranged his assets in such a way that when he died, he reduced his tax burden. That, the true socialist that he was. So, this is something which people, of course, all political persuasions do. And I think, therefore, you're right, Al. I think that if you start making the attacks based on this kind of personal stuff, you can allude to it, you can bring it up. But if you make it the central focus of your attack, I think that, actually, I don't think the British people like it. I think we've seen these kind of attacks on over the years. I've written about Nigel Farage extensively, and one of the things the Labour Party used to do was always attack Nigel Farage's background, which I always thought was wrong. It's like, you disagree with his policies, speak about his policies, but going on about where he's from, I think the British people were turned off by that, and I think they would be again in this case if the attack was purely Rishi's rich, therefore don't vote for him. I think people are smarter than that.
Owen, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. I find it very difficult.
What?
All of this sort of thing. Well, because there is part of society that says, if we haven't got it, you can't have it.
Mm.
You should all be paying more and more and more. And yet, anyone who then gets a bit of money wants to pay as little tax as possible and save as much as possible. I mean, that's human nature, isn't it? You've got to follow the rules, and if CGT are the rules, then you follow the rules. So it's the
as long as you follow the rules. Yes.
You've got to follow the rules.
I mean, J.K. Rowling, I was saying earlier, is so fantastically wealthy and has been incredibly successful. Talk about being a self-made billionairess or something. She paid £40 million in taxes in the past 12 months. Now, that's fair, isn't it? Because she has earned an awful lot of money. She's paid her due amount of tax, 40 million. But just think, that is making money for us. Hopefully that will have built a hospital or two. Or a school or something. It goes into the main coffers of the government, but that actually is for the country, isn't it?
But there's probably an argument that says, she could have paid more, because some of that will be CGT.
Yes, some of it will, yeah.
Yeah, so she can't win.
Ed Sheeran, apparently the next highest paying, he paid 52 million in tax, I think. Something like that. Isn't that amazing?
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Just numbers to us.
Yeah, I'd want to forget about how much money I was earning if that was the case.
Yeah.
Talking in memory, President Biden has pushed back against claims that he has an issue with his. It comes after a report revealed he allegedly forgot the years when he was vice president and when his son died of brain cancer.
I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad, I let you speak. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president. I did not share classified information. I did not share it.
With your ghostwriter?
With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not.
Well, in the meantime, one of Biden's allies has come out to say that Biden suffered the worst day yesterday of his presidency. And another friend dubbed the situation beyond devastating.
Well, earlier we spoke to former advisor to the Bank of England, Roger Gewolb.
I think there's three issues here. The first is that you're right. I think he still needs the mental examinations that he's refusing to take, but doctors and Mr. Herr, the special counsel, pardon me, have said that he is not competent to stand trial for the classified information he was illegally in possession of. Now, somebody who can't go before a court and stand trial really shouldn't be running a country. There's pretty much no doubt about that. 76% of people in a very recent NBC News poll said he really shouldn't be president, he shouldn't have a second term. So that's the first issue. The second issue is the Democrats really have themselves in a pickle because they've got nobody. I mean, there is simply nobody. The British bookies, who are usually pretty right, they've got Trump on odds of 1 to 1. They've got Biden at 2.5 to 1. Michelle Obama is at 20 to 1. Nikki Haley at 33 something. I can't remember them exactly, but I mean,
do you think Michelle Obama is a possibility in any way at all?
Not really. She has no experience. I mean, you know, she has no political experience at running anything.
Well, she's always said she doesn't want it. She's never.
And she doesn't want it. But they're making a lot of noise about it. But I really don't think. I don't think that's right. I don't really think they've got anybody. They should have been planning long ago, but they haven't. I think they're steadfastly committed to staying with Joe. I think that Barack Obama pulls a lot of his strings, and he's committed to keeping him there with those strings. And the third point is that how do you get rid of him? I mean, he is convinced he's doing a good job. There's nothing wrong with him. You can't say leave. He's only going to leave if he wants to leave. There's no way to... The days of the smoke-filled rooms with the kingmakers is long gone. You cannot get him out other than voluntarily.
Well, what do you think? We're torn, actually, feeling rather sorry that... at what age is he at?
81.
I can't believe that. 81. And during the upcoming election, he's going to be more and more seen in public and having to make speeches.
Hugely
stressful. Goodness only knows whether they do a presidential debate. But how stressful is that to somebody who clearly, even though he denies it, is sort of struggling? Or he certainly looks to be struggling. And it's not a good look, is it?
Well, no, it's not. It's not. Anyway, I'm sure you've got a view on that one. In the meantime, let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Here's Aidan.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a cold start out there in Scotland, but it is turning milder from the south this weekend. A mix of rain, showers and some sunny spells. Some sunshine to begin the day across England and Wales, but frequent showers returning into Wales and the southwest by the afternoon, staying drier further east. Meanwhile, Scotland and Northern Ireland start cloudy, but some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, whilst the rain and hill snow continues to drive in across northeast Scotland, mostly turning back to rain by the end of the day. Feeling cold here, much milder elsewhere, back in the double figures widely away from central and northern Scotland. And that rain continues to drive into northeast Scotland during Saturday night. Snow confined to the tops of the mountains. Otherwise, for much of the UK, it's a blustery night with further showers or longer spells of rain moving in from the west, a lot of cloud cover, and as a result, for most, it is frost-free, temperatures staying in the mid to high single figures in many places. We start off Sunday with a lot of cloud, some mist patches around as well. Driest towards the east, some showers feeding in from the west, but as the day goes on, actually, an increased chance of the cloud breaking and at least some brighter interludes coming through. But always there'll be outbreaks of rain and showers feeding in from the west, drier to the east and mild across the board. Mid to high single figures in the north, 11 or 12 in the south.
Right, well, there's still plenty of time for you to grab your chance to win £18,000 cash in our Great British giveaway. Here are the details you'll need.
This is your chance to win £18,000 cash in our very latest Great British giveaway. Cash to spend on anything you like. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. What would you use that for?
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of February. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck indeed. Stay with us here on Breakfast. We're going to be talking about medicinal cannabis. Should it be more available in the UK?
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it? Are they...
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucy, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucy, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, on Monday, the Prime Minister is taking part in a special People's Forum live here on GB News. So over the course of the hour, starts at 8 o'clock, he'll take questions directly from the studio audience. Now, if you want to be there so you can ask your question directly to Rishi Sunak, go to gbnews.com/PM to register your interest, or if you can't be bothered to type it in, scan the QR code that's on the screen now.
And as we were saying earlier, you'll have the pleasure of meeting Stephen.
Yeah, it's going to be...
You're going to be hosting it.
Yeah, I'm going to be hosting it. Not asking the questions, just oiling the machine.
Maybe asking a few follow-up questions. Maybe making sure he answers the questions.
Well, that'll be
That's
the key.
probably your job, isn't
That's
it?
That's the key to it all. So it's going to be great. And following in the footsteps of the People's Forum we did, was it last year or the year before now, with Liz Truss and
Oh, that's
Alison
right,
Stewart.
yes.
Yeah, I don't know how long ago that was now. I've lost track.
Yes. Must be over a year ago.
It must be, because Rishi's been PM for more than a year.
Yeah, yes.
So there you go.
How time flies.
When you're having fun.
Yeah. Right, now here's an interesting one. Medicinal cannabis, because the top boss of a medicinal cannabis company has said the number of people buying the drug has increased by, wait for it, over 1,000% during the last year. Why?
Well, some are saying it's down to long NHS waiting lists, which in turn has meant people are now choosing to self-medicate.
Well, you would, wouldn't you? Medical marijuana was legalised in the UK back in 2018, but only under certain circumstances.
OK, let's talk to medicinal cannabis campaigner Emma Appleby, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. It seems extraordinary that they sort of legalise it for some people, not for others. I know you've got experience with your daughter. What difference does it actually make to her?
It's keeping my little girl alive. It's the only thing that's helped her in 10 years now. We've been trying to find medication for her epilepsy, and we've found that medicinal cannabis is the only thing that is keeping her alive. We've run out of it twice in the last 5 years, and both times she ended up in intensive care in a coma, fighting for her life, basically. So she needs it. It's not the fact that it helps her, it's the fact that it's keeping her with us and it's keeping her safe.
And, I mean, before medicinal cannabis was legalised, what were you able to do for her to help her condition?
Not a lot. It was basically just comfort her as much as you could, but she spent a lot of her time in intensive care with before medical cannabis. In 2018, she spent 3 months in London. Basically, the doctors didn't know what to do. There was nothing else they could try. And that's kind of where we are again now. I've been fighting for 5 years to get a prescription on the NHS, and it's costing me up to £2,000 a month privately. And that's kind of where I've been for 5 years.
So at the moment, you have to pay privately in order to get it. But it is legally, you are legally able to do that, but you can't get it on the NHS.
No, so it was legal. So there is a medication called Epidiolex, which was legalised in 2018, but that's only for two different conditions. Tegan has got one of those conditions, but unfortunately, Epidiolex on its own is not enough to help Tegan. She needs the THC combination, which is what they're refusing to prescribe, even though it is legal in the UK.
Why do you think there is so much pushback on this? Is it because people think if you're taking medicinal cannabis, you're getting high? Is there still this misconception?
Yeah, I do think a lot of it is down to education and stigma. And I think it's fear. I think people don't understand the drug, and I think that's where the issue is. We need a lot more education in the NHS, and I know that Professor Mike Barnes, who's part of our campaign, he is doing that as much as he can with the NHS. He's helping to train doctors and make them understand what this medication can do when it's used correctly, because the medication we're talking about exactly for Tegan doesn't have a high THC content. So recreational cannabis has a very high THC content, which gives you the high. Tegan's medication doesn't. It has a very high CBD content and a very small THC content. So she doesn't get high on her medication. But that is what we need to target epilepsy. But it's different for different conditions. So they all need different ratios. But we are focused mainly on a high CBD, a low THC for epilepsy.
Yeah, and those are the sort of active substances in cannabis, aren't they? But when it first became legal for you to be able to give this to Tegan, how did you know how to do it and how much to use? And I mean, you must have been a bit scared yourself.
Yeah, it was terrifying, but I've got a lot of good guidance from, you've probably heard of Hannah Deacon and Alfie Dingley. They are friends of mine now, and they guided me through it. And then I got a private doctor who, obviously Mike Barnes, has helped me through the whole 5 years. I've been guided by private doctors, and everything's been private doctor, private importer, private NHS, private prescription. So all the costs have added up there.
Well, look, we wish you well in moving forward in this campaign, because I tell you what, it just sounds like common sense, which is what makes it so frustrating. Emma Appleby, really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Absolutely. And if anyone's watching at the moment who has any experience of this as well, you would have thought, logically, that if something is now legal, a doctor would be able to prescribe it on the NHS.
It's not on the tariff. It's not on the tariff.
No, that's
which is... It's got to be looked at.
But if a mother is saying that it makes such a difference, a life-changing difference to her daughter, surely that is evidence enough, isn't it?
You think so? Anyway, let us know what you think on that one. As always, Aidan's here. You've got the sport coming up in just a moment. What have you got for us?
Yes, indeed. Thanks very much indeed, Stephen. It's a huge weekend of sport with Six Nations rugby. An update on the future of Gareth Southgate as England manager and Super Bowl 58. It's in Las Vegas. Stay tuned.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right.
Growth.
And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, 1 year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
7:38. Morning to you. Aidan's got the sport for us this morning. Should we have a bit of Six Nations?
Why not? Yeah, the second week of the tournament. Big event this. It's been getting bigger every single year, largely because the calibre of the sides has got better as time has gone on. Ireland kicked off last Friday with a win in Marseille, actually, against France. They're absolutely outstanding, and they're now firmly installed as the favourites to win this event. They're in action tomorrow against Italy, who we think will probably get the wooden spoon. England was interesting last week. They were in trouble against Italy at half-time, but they turned it around in the second half. That would have been very embarrassing, Anne, if they'd lost to Italy. Italy tend to lose all their games, although there are signs that they're improving. And Wales is interesting as well, because they were terrible in the first half in the Principality Stadium in Cardiff against Scotland. They were 27-0 down at half-time, pulled it back to within a point, and I think if it had gone on for another 5-10 minutes, they might have reversed it completely, which would have been fantastic. But what it meant for Scotland was that, despite dominating in that first half, it felt like a defeat at the end of it. So Scotland are in action first out of the blocks today at 2:15 this afternoon. England-Wales at 4:45 at Twickenham. Wales don't have a very good record here in London at all. George North is the only one of their players who's ever won at Twickenham, and that was in the pool stage in 2015 when Wales played in the World Cup and for the Lions, so it wasn't even for Wales. So it's going to be an excellent day, and we'll have more on that tomorrow, obviously.
Lovely. We better talk Super Bowl.
Why not?
Super Bowl Sunday tomorrow.
I posed you a question, didn't I? And I'm going to tell
what
everyone.
Was it again? It was what got the biggest ever TV.
So let's give. So it's the San Francisco 49ers against the Kansas City Chiefs in Vegas tomorrow evening, 10:30 our time. So last year's TV audience was 115 million live TV audience, and that was a second. It's going to be overtaken this year by a significant distance, 200 million we're expecting. So I'll give you a clue. In 1969.
Moon landing.
Yeah, I was surprised.
How did I not think of that?
But I was surprised because it was so far back. I wasn't sure that how many people had TVs then.
Yeah, but every TV that existed will have been tuned into that. What were the figure for that?
That was 180 million pounds. Pounds, sorry. 100 viewers. Yeah. So I don't think that's the TV sets. That's people around. But it's difficult to quantify that, isn't it?
Shots are of people crowded around one television to watch it, and people in Times Square looking at the big screen and everything.
So it's the massive television or global TV event, as we've just mentioned. But how much do you think a half-time advert would cost? How much are Fox charging for a 30-second advert?
I think $20 million.
No, not quite.
Certainly 10 million.
No. 7. Cheap.
That's what you
thought. It's also the biggest cause of absenteeism as well. Because apparently something like 16.1 million people have already announced, or not announced, but they've already planned their sick day excuse.
Well, apparently lots of people go to Disney World and Disneyland.
That's right.
On Super Bowl day because you don't have to queue for anything.
No.
Usher is on at half-time as well.
Oh, is that
which is a massive thing. Yeah.
Yes,
so we've got
always an enormous
exalted company as well. I mean, U2 have done it before. Lady Gaga, Prince, Madonna, Michael Jackson.
Oh, it's a massive.
It is, exactly.
I'm not a fan of Usher.
You're not?
No.
Can you
that's a bit disappointing.
I can imagine you singing two of his songs.
No, not my cup of tea. Not my cup of tea. Usher, apologies, Mr. Usher.
All right, one for you. What's your favourite movie ever?
Favourite movie ever? I saw one called The Zodiac in 2007. It's about the Zodiac Killer. Yes, I quite liked it. It was
Gyllenhaal.
I went to see. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well done. That's good memory. And so I went with my friend who's
been sat next to Barry Norman.
No, well, not quite.
I went with a friend who's a police officer. He was interested in the police bit. I was interested in the journalism bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, there you go.
All right, Val says my favourites are Gone with the Wind, Spartacus, Some Like It Hot, and Dances with Wolves.
Quite a few.
Everybody's got some really good ideas. Casablanca and The Great Escape, says Gary in Langham. Morning. And To Kill a Mockingbird, Terence in New Malden. Very classy.
Yes, keep your thoughts coming through to us this morning. We've got the papers heading your way in just a moment.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
7:45. Let's see what's in the papers today with the writer and columnist Emma Wolfe and the journalist Benedict Spence. Good morning to you both. Emma, let's kick off with NHS strikes covered in The Guardian.
Yeah, well, this is the 10th wave of industrial action that's going to be taking place in the NHS since last March. Really, this is
I've lost track, frankly.
Record strikes. And the last one, last month, do you remember that 6-day walkout? That was the biggest strike in the NHS's history. So this 5-day walkout at the end of this month, so 24th to 28th of February, has been announced. Basically, talks between the union and the government broke down. Victoria Atkins, the health secretary, has been saying there's no more money. They're saying, well, you know, we will delay this if you are willing to talk money, and they're not. The government are holding firm on this. It really is now it's starting to affect a lot of people. 100,000 patients will be affected by, they will have their appointments, they will have procedures cancelled. We've got a backlog now of 7.6 million events, you know, like procedures or appointments, which are on hold. It's just an absolute mess, and really there seems to be no end in sight because both sides are holding firm.
Why doesn't the government just pay them what they want?
Because then...
And everybody has to get paid what they want.
35%?
I know. But I know all the arguments on both sides.
What about everybody else in the public services? What about everybody else in the country? And what about
we need our
it?
doctors. We've got to stop them moving to Australia.
Well, then next time they'll say we want 70%, Anne. I mean, You simply can't
It's
do
a very tricky thing. Long term, it can only be alleviated by training more doctors. And we have this as well with the lack of dentist places in this country. Everybody's saying, oh, 20 grand bonus to move here. Actually, the problem is we have a cap on how many dentists we train in the first place. That would alleviate the problem, but it takes a very long time to sort of filter through the system. And as with everything in politics in this country, we don't like doing long-term things. We like short-term solutions, and that's why you end up with really long-term
Benedict,
problems.
wasn't it the BMA themselves who imposed a cap on the amount of junior doctors who could be trained so that they would retain this power?
Yeah, exactly. I think also they're hoping for a Labour government. They're hoping to get a slightly better deal with it. I think they are. I think they are. But I think that they will be mistaken given quite how hesitant Wes Streeting has been to offer anybody anything. He's said plenty of times, there is no money, guys. I don't know what it is you're hoping
He's very centre ground in that
brilliant.
sense.
He's very good.
Wes Streeting is the Labour politician, and I say this, don't say this lightly, is the Labour politician who I have the most respect for. I think he's been brilliant on the NHS talking about reform.
He talks sense.
Yeah, he does.
It's been a very smart move by the Labour Party to put him so prominently, rather than everything be about Keir Starmer, is they've been able to identify, they're not sort of, incredible characters or anything like that, but people who talk very straight about these things, are good communicators. They push them to the front, and it does sort of give you this image of a slightly more collegiate and therefore slightly more united Labour Party than they were under Jeremy Corbyn.
Reminds me a little bit of the Lib Dems under their previous leadership, 20 years ago, where actually, Charlie Kennedy, and obviously with his sad demise, but you'd ask him a question and you would get an answer.
Charles Kennedy did wonders for the Lib Dems. I think people forget because he was a very good politician. He really raised the profile, and I remember actually quite how well respected. You're right, how well respected he was broadly, even by people who would have never voted Lib Dem. Actually,
he was in it because he cared, and he sounded as though he cared. Do you think there's any argument that maybe the government is digging its heels in with the doctors and men because they're just thinking, OK, let the Labour government sort it out?
I do think that there's some of that. It's a huge problem. It's a huge amount of money you'd have to commit if you did want to pay them, or if you wanted to, change rules about bringing more doctors in. That seems to have been the long-term solution for a long time, and that's very unpopular with a lot of Conservative voters to have even more migration. So I do suspect that there's a little bit of that at play, which isn't a great way to run a country. But frankly, if you are the government and you expect to lose as badly as they do, you might as well be thinking, this is not going to be my problem in a few months' time.
But also, more than that, I think the government are genuinely terrified that they say, OK, they just cave in, and then you've got the rail, then you've got teachers, you've got everybody demanding just, the sky's the limit.
Political commentators demanding more money.
Benedict, that'll be the day.
No chance. Benedict, can we have a look at the Times? This, as a comparatively new dog owner, I found this very worrying. There's been a dog attack which has killed 45 sheep in Dartmoor.
The reason that this is come to the attention of the national press is because of the number of how many sheep have been killed. And
that's a devastating loss for the farmer.
It's a very old, rare flock of sheep. To go into the specifics, I think it's the second oldest flock of this particular breed of sheep in the country. Huge amounts of animals have been left mauled, not killed, but have also been mauled. A lot of lambs have been left orphaned, which is going to create havoc down the line for them. But why I think this is an interesting story is it's not unusual, actually. It's simply that this is too large to ignore. Dog attacks on livestock is a very serious problem in the countryside and has been for a very long time. I remember speaking to a police officer who said we don't have the resources to deal with this. And when it comes to hunting with dogs, you've got two issues. You've got dogs that are dangerous and off the lead, but you also have dogs that are deliberately set on livestock and wildlife as well for people's amusement, for their entertainment. And it's why when you look at what are the most popular breeds around the country, in cities they tend to be sort of toy dogs or Labradors. In the countryside, you might imagine it would be a Labrador or terriers. It's not. It's these kind of hunting, fighting dogs, and they're there for that very specific reason.
They should be, trained. You've got to be properly trained. You've got to have recall.
We don't know what
Do we know if there's one dog, or was it a pack of dogs?
Well, this is the thing. The police are trying to identify through the saliva left on some of the corpses, the DNA, whether or not they can identify this dog. And in addition to this, of course, I'm talking about pre-lockdown. Post-lockdown, of course, we all know about this with these XL bully dogs, these large types of dogs. They've just exploded in terms of popularity. So, and again, that's less a question of their being set on animals for people's sick amusement, and as you say, dogs that are really difficult to control. And if they get out and they get after a pack of sheep, well, everybody knows that's a very dangerous thing.
God,
Dog licences.
Devastating.
Sorry.
I think you're right. We're moving in that direction where people will have to have licences because you cannot allow this kind of devastation to just go on.
I mean, this crippling for a farm, something like that. It's absolutely not right. Should we have a look at that? A bit of Harry and Meghan.
Yeah,
Go
come on, lighten the mood a little bit.
No.
Well, why was Prince Harry's visit so fleeting, I hear you ask?
Because he had something to get to.
He had something to get back to. It turns out that just after his 25-hour dash, 11,000 air miles, by the way, 11,000 air miles for this 40-minute chat with King Charles, turns out that Harry was back. I'm going to get so much hate, every time you say anything about Harry and Meghan. Anyway, turns out that he was back on Thursday at the NFL Honors Awards in Vegas. Harry, he was hosting this, or he was speaking at this event. He cracked joke after joke. Apparently, he was in very high spirits, and that was quite a big.
Did he not mention his father?
Day in his area, he didn't mention Charles at all, which is possibly a good thing.
Yeah, because
possibly
he had
not
that
the moment.
Down very well.
I mean, he is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. If he mentions the struggles that Kate and Charles have been going through, then he.
What's interesting about this is obviously he knew he had that commitment back in Las Vegas, but he's still, I mean, good or bad, I don't know what you think. I mean, obviously when he heard that his father had got cancer, he immediately jumped on a plane, coming here, knowing that he couldn't stay long anyway because he had to get back to Las Vegas.
Yeah. And that's one way of looking at it. And look, so much of this, I'm really aware that it's speculation. We don't know. But I've heard also this sort of slight counter to that, which is Charles wasn't expecting this. He didn't want it, that it was actually a bit of an inconvenience, this sort of suddenly appearing. So it's really hard to speculate. This is a family obviously in real trauma, really. I mean, the fact that the brothers didn't meet, didn't speak is really, really sad. And I was sort of thinking that this would possibly be an opportunity for a family just to kind of come back together.
But it might be. It might be
because it's so much bigger than you said, she said, he said. But look how deep these wounds go.
Most families are pretty unforgivable. He did. And he said it about the King, and he said it about Camilla, and about the Princess of Wales.
I know. And Spare, I mean, they haven't spoken in many months. Spare was published. It said absolutely published unforgivable things, allegations, racism, all of that. So I agree with you, but I also know that at moments, sometimes at a funeral, when someone dies, there are those moments when everybody just says, you know what, Benedict's laughing.
No,
I'm going into full Mills and Boone mode here.
Nobody ever makes up at my family get.
We're out of time. Good to see you both. Thank you very much indeed.
Should we get some weather now from Aidan McGibbon?
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a cold start out there in Scotland, but it is turning milder from the south this weekend. A mix of rain, showers and some sunny spells. Some sunshine to begin the day across England and Wales, but frequent showers returning into Wales and the southwest by the afternoon, staying drier further east. Meanwhile, Scotland and Northern Ireland start cloudy, but some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, whilst the rain and hill snow continues to drive in across northeast Scotland, mostly turning back to rain by the end of the day. Feeling cold here, much milder elsewhere, back in the double figures widely away from central and northern Scotland. And that rain continues to drive into northeast Scotland during Saturday night. Snow confined to the tops of the mountains. Otherwise, for much of the UK, it's a blustery night with further showers or longer spells of rain moving in from the west. A lot of cloud cover, and as a result, for most, it is frost-free. Temperatures staying in the mid to high single figures in many places. We start off Sunday with a lot of cloud, some mist patches around as well. Driest towards the east, some showers feeding in from the west, but as the day goes on, actually, an increased chance of the cloud breaking and at least some brighter interludes coming through. But always there'll be outbreaks of rain and showers feeding in from the west, drier to the east and mild across the board. Mid to high single figures in the north, 11 or 12 in the south.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seem to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in The Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger.
Okay.
And that's why monitoring is so important.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning to you. Coming up to 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 10th of February. Today.
It is our now main working theory that ezedi has actually gone into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. All of our work thus far has not seen him come off the bridge.
Police believe the chemical attack suspect, Abdul Ezedi, is most probably dead as the Met searches the River Thames.
The Prime Minister earned more than £2 million last year, according to his tax returns. So we're asking, does that make him out of touch with the hard-up public?
Okay, my memory is fine. Take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
Joe Biden pushes back against memory loss claims after an ally of his says he's suffered the worst day of his leadership.
Powers to ban pavement parking should be extended right across England, according to councils around the country. Currently, apparently, it's only banned in London, but we've also heard banned in Scotland too.
A medicinal marijuana firm has found their customer base has increased by 1,000% over the last year as NHS patient lists grow. One mother whose daughter suffers from a genetic disorder told us of her plight.
Trying to find medication for her epilepsy, and we've found that medicinal cannabis is the only thing that is keeping her alive.
Good morning. We look ahead to a huge weekend of Six Nations rugby as England hosts Wales at Twickenham. There's news on the future of Gareth Southgate as England manager, and it's Super Bowl 58 in Vegas.
A mixed weekend of weather to come. There'll be some rain, there'll be some showers, but there'll also be some sunny spells. Full details coming up in the forecast.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
I tell you what, it's a proper mixed bag when it comes to parking on pavements from you all this morning. Nicholas says, no joined-up thinking. Many of the roads in the north of England are very narrow and housing is terraced. Park your car fully in the road on either side and no one else can get down them.
Yeah, Angie says, I live in a village and I'm so sick of the footpaths on the estate being so seriously damaged by not only car parking but heavier, larger vehicles too. And on the edges of grassed areas, digging into the grass makes a horrible mess.
Stephen says if there was to be no parking on pavements, then all councils would have to make pavements narrower. In my area, the road is so narrow that buses wouldn't get up the street if cars were just parked on the road.
Tony says, I'm a disabled and drive a mobility scooter, and when I drive on the pavement in Poole, there are cars parked all over the pavements. I am forced to drive on the road to get around the cars.
And where's that one I just saw? Oh, Lord. Oh, here we go. Tessa says, my immediate neighbour parks his third car...
Ah, yes, it's people with multiple cars.
Entirely on a pavement, not even just two wheels, the entire car. It just shows a lack of thought and respect for other people, especially pedestrians. Well, that's totally crackers, isn't it? But it's the idea that you can't just even put your two wheels on the curb and leave plenty of room on the pavement, but just, you know, so you're just taking yourself off the road a little bit.
But you've got to do it with a bit of thought, haven't you?
Bit of thought.
You've got to look at the area that you've left on the pavement and think, could a mobility scooter get down
past,
there?
Yeah.
Could somebody pushing a pushchair and all the rest of it? We live in Newquay, says Brenda, and the on-pavement parking is really dreadful. You can't get past, especially when cars are on the pavement on one side and people's hedges and overgrown trees meet, blocking the pavement altogether. True, seen that too.
But a bit of sensible thinking on it.
Yeah.
It's no good just banning it. You've just got to have a bit of sensible thinking on it, I think.
It's about showing some sort of respect for other people, isn't it, I think?
Including drivers.
But if they ban it everywhere, then it becomes a real problem because somebody else wrote in, didn't they? Said they live in a place where, you know, like a Victorian terraced street, which obviously was never built. The street was never built wide enough for modern car parking and car driving. And she said that if people didn't park on the pavement, you wouldn't be able to get two-way traffic down the road.
Yeah. Mind you, I was a friend of mine who's in a wheelchair, and I went to visit and parked on the pavement, and there wasn't, you know, then we were going out for a walk, and we had to push him. Sorry, Luke. We had to push him onto the. We did have to. It was in a cul-de-sac, so it wasn't about.
Onto the road.
We had to go onto the road to get around my car, which was mortifying.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Actually.
I'll bet.
Though, did you tell me off, Luke, about that, or were you very polite? You're probably very polite about it.
You're probably really, yeah.
But it was. So you do have to think. You've got to think both ways about this one.
I'm trying to find that one about a Victorian terrace. But that's true.
I just saw that one a minute ago.
Oh, did you? All right.
I've lost it. We've got so
loads
many
of
emails.
views. Can't
Here we go.
tell
That was
you how
Chris.
many.
That was Chris. There you go. That's that
Yeah,
one, isn't it?
at our old address in Scotland, which was a street with Victorian-era housing, no one had driveways. Parking on both sides of the street could barely cope with the volume of cars. It's a good point. What do? We all own one car, probably.
Most of us,
but
yeah.
A heck of a lot of people own two. And then if you do your business, if you've got a business where you need a van as well, you've got to park that. And it can be a real problem for your neighbours.
OK, your thoughts on that, keep them coming. Keep them coming through. We've got thousands of emails this morning, which is wonderful.
Brilliant, yeah.
But our main news today is that police are claiming the suspect in the Clapham chemical attack may have jumped into the River Thames. Now, that's as the manhunt continues, actually, though it now seems they're more determined to find a body rather than anything else. This is the Met's Commander, John Saville, speaking yesterday.
The last 24 hours, we have meticulously been viewing all of the available CCTV in and around the Chelsea Bridge area. And we've also worked with Transport for London in accessing the CCTV from their buses. It is our now main working theory that ezedi has actually gone into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. All of our work thus far has not seen him come off the bridge. We are in contact with his family in order to pass that news on and to provide the necessary information and support for them, because of course I'm sure they will also be very worried about what's happened to him and what he has done.
Now, all of this comes after officers raided 2 Tyneside properties on Thursday, which they thought were connected to the attack. And just as a reminder, if you need one, ezedi is wanted for attempted murder after throwing that chemical substance on a 31-year-old woman and her 2 children and injuring 9 others.
Let's talk to former Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville, who joins us now. Mike, good to see you. What do you make of this? Because a lot of people are torn, saying, well, the police have just given up. So they're saying he's gone into the Thames. Other people saying, no, what they're basically saying is they're absolutely convinced he is dead. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I suggested at the very start that he might commit suicide afterwards. When people commit these highly emotive, evil crimes like he did, often it's the last thing they do. And my expertise is CCTV and finding people. And I was in charge of the CCTV for the London riots, so that's 100,000 hours. So it takes a lot of effort to go through, and the cameras aren't linked as when the commander says there's been and looking at all the CCTV, there'll be council CCTV, there'll be shop CCTV, ring doorbells to look at. And he said there about the buses, all the London buses have a front-facing camera, which is really there to deal with traffic accidents and the like. But of course, it can be very useful when you're looking for somebody in a certain place. Now, the fact that he's on a bridge, so you've got a start point and an end point, 2 ends of the bridge, and you've got good CCTV cover there, it would seem very likely that he has entered the water. But the problem here, of course, is 100 years ago, Lord Jewett said that people just don't want to see justice doesn't have to be done. It has to be seen to be done. And the facts are that his body may never be recovered because the Thames is very deep at the moment. It's winter, it's fast flowing. He could be out to sea and gone and never found. So people have seen this evil crime and they never see anybody in the dock being sentenced for it. That's the issue here, I think.
And particularly hard on his victims, because I don't know whether they'll ever feel any sense of closure, because they'll never really know whether he is dead or whether he was able to successfully escape.
That's exactly the point, Anne. So they might have, could he, people always like the Alcatraz men, did they swim across, have they disappeared? No one ever knows. And it's the wickedness of this crime. And the victim will be scarred for life and will never know what has happened to him. So the best case scenario is that the Thames River Police, very professional, they'll be doing all their search techniques. They'll have people who are experts in river movement. They'll be estimating where he might be with the flow and when the body might appear. Because we saw with the tragic cases of Nicola Bullion, things like that, that sometimes these bodies they're down for three weeks and things like that before they emerge. So it would be some time, if he has gone in the river, that this body is potentially found.
OK. Former DCI Mike Neville, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the latest tax records have shown that the Prime Minister earned over £2 million last year, which amounted then to over £500,000 he had to pay in tax.
Yeah, the documents revealed he paid an overall tax rate of 23% in the UK. Now, that's much lower than the top income rate, that is 45%. But, of course, it wasn't all income.
It was capital gains tax, which is different, isn't it?
It is different, yeah.
I think it's the money that your money makes. Well, this all comes as the country is facing a cost of living crisis. And it does beg the question, doesn't it, of whether the Prime Minister can possibly empathise with the problems being faced by so many people at the moment.
Let's talk to former UKIP Deputy Chair Suzanne Evans, who's here in the studio.
Morning.
Good to see you this morning. Does it matter that the PM has earned loads of money because he's paid a lot of tax?
Well, he's paid a lot of tax. He's, as you just said, only paid 23% as opposed to the 45% rate that he'd have paid if this was income. But because this is money that's been held in a blind trust in the United States, it's capital gains tax, so it's only paid at 20%. And I think the issue is why also is he investing in the US as Prime Minister? So it's interesting, isn't it? It's that whole thing about... Well, remember, Stephen, this comes on top of criticisms a couple of years ago that he spent £19 months when he was Chancellor as a US resident for tax purposes when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and 6 years as an MP. And of course, his wife was also found to be a non-dom, not paying tax in the UK. So he's perfectly entitled to this income. It's not tax dodging, it's perfectly legal. But it's about that thing in politics we call optics. How does this look? And actually, it doesn't look terribly good.
I'm not sure it would look very good, though, if he wasn't wise with his money, especially when he was Chancellor.
Yeah, and a former banker. He'd look very silly,
that's
wouldn't
right.
he?
Wouldn't
Yes,
it look silly if he
absolutely.
was paying too much tax that he didn't need to? You can argue it both ways, can't you?
You can, absolutely. And I suppose we could also argue, couldn't we, that would we want somebody that wasn't very good with money running our country? No, we wouldn't. But I think the issue here is this comes at a time when, for most of us, we've found that we're paying higher taxes because the tax thresholds have been frozen. We've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. So while the Prime Minister is paying arguably very little tax on his investments, the rest of us are paying much more. The Taxpayers Alliance released some research yesterday showing that 4.5 million more people now are paying tax, and 2.1 of those are paying it at a higher rate because the Chancellor froze the tax thresholds in 2021 and says that he's not going to put them up until 2028, assuming, of course, he's still in power by then.
Yeah, but of course, and I know it's sort of cold comfort to people who aren't very happy with all of this, but those frozen tax thresholds affect everyone, and they affect the Prime Minister on his salary for being Prime Minister.
Yeah, he gets around £140,000 a year as Prime Minister, and of course he pays income tax at the full rate on that. But I think, Labour are going to be all over this. They are all over it already. They're saying he's out of touch. And you do wonder just how in touch with the common man or woman can be a man who has married a woman who's the daughter of the billionaire Infosys IT company. That company's worth $72 billion. Family's obviously very wealthy. He's got several homes. There were stories, weren't there, that he'd had a swimming pool put in that was so expensive they had to change the electricity system in order to heat it. So again, it all comes back to how in touch is our Prime Minister in the midst of a cost of living crisis. So as I say, he's done nothing wrong. It's just about how it looks.
I just wonder, though, how in touch is any front bench politician on opposition benches or government benches with people in Blackpool, for example, and probably not very.
Well, I think you're right. There's no doubt that perhaps, I suppose, since the Second World War, probably, the makeup of the House of Commons has changed enormously. There used to be working-class people, miners, people farming, people who were MPs. Look how many MPs today you have who've never actually done a job at all in their life. They've just gone straight from university for a degree in politics into working for a Member of Parliament and then becoming a Member of Parliament yourself. I think you make a very good point.
But the point has also been made already this morning that Labour can't make meat of this during the election campaign because so many of them are very wealthy too. It seems to me by the time you get to the top in politics, you're doing pretty well. You've got other interests, haven't you?
Yeah, what a shame I didn't stay in it. I might be a bit richer.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you get a very good a salary as a Member of Parliament, just over £86,000.
But Keir Starmer has his own independent wealth, doesn't he?
He will have his independent wealth
Emily
as well.
Thornberry was mentioned earlier. I think if you look at the Labour front bench, an awful lot of them are much more wealthy than you'd think.
Absolutely, but as you know, Anne, hypocrisy in politics is something that happens all the time. You can be making a lot of money, but it doesn't stop you criticising somebody else who's making it too.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Cynical, aren't I?
Well,
no,
cynical
what's the
but
space
accurate.
to happen?
Yeah, Suzanne, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
OK, let's find out what the weather's doing for you. Here's Aidan McGivern.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a cold start out there in Scotland, but it is turning milder from the south this weekend. A mix of rain, showers and some sunny spells. Some sunshine to begin the day across England and Wales, but frequent showers returning into Wales and the southwest by the afternoon, staying drier further east. Meanwhile, Scotland and Northern Ireland's dark cloudy, but some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, whilst the rain and hill snow continues to drive in across northeast Scotland, mostly turning back to rain by the end of the day. Feeling cold here, much milder elsewhere, back in the double figures widely away from central and northern Scotland. And that rain continues to drive into northeast Scotland during Saturday night. Snow confined to the tops of the mountains. Otherwise, for much of the UK, it's a blustery night with further showers or longer spells of rain moving in from the west, a lot of cloud cover, and as a result, for most, it is frost-free, temperatures staying in the mid to high single figures in many places. We start off Sunday with a lot of cloud, some mist patches around as well. Driest towards the east, some showers feeding in from the west, but as the day goes on, actually, an increased chance of the cloud breaking and at least some brighter interludes coming through. But always there'll be outbreaks of rain and showers feeding in from the west, drier to the east and mild across the board. Mid to high single figures in the north, 11 or 12 in the south.
Thank you, Aidan. Now, there's still plenty... What are you looking at?
Sorry, apparently, according to the Daily Star, if you're bald, you're more popular with the ladies.
Is that right?
Apparently, yeah. They're saying, tough luck, Brad Pitt, you loser. Because he has a full head of hair. I don't know. Is that true?
I don't think you can
Do you
generalise
bald
like
men?
that, can you?
I don't think so.
You like somebody because of who they are, not whether they've got a bald head or not. Anyway, whatever. Let me tell you about the Great British Giveaway. There's still plenty of time for you to grab your chance to win 18 grand in our Great British Giveaway.
That's the one.
Here's all the details you'll need.
This is your chance to win £18,000 cash in our very latest Great British Giveaway. Cash to spend on anything you like. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. What would you use that for?
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of February. Good luck.
Now, do stick with us, because coming up is a real interesting debate. Because you've heard about this airline, that it's Finnish Air, I think. Finnair. They're going to weigh passengers. Would you like to be contemplating going on your holiday, really looking forward to it, and then you have to go through the humiliation of being weighed before you're allowed on the plane? We'll be debating that next.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Now, a Finnish airline, Finnair, aptly enough, has announced that it's going to start weighing passengers along with their carry-on luggage in order to better work out the plane's weight before takeoff.
Well, Finnair has already defended their controversial move, because some people are getting really upset about it, saying that the information will be used to balance the flight better. However, travellers have said that the plan is cruel because it will cause such embarrassment to overweight passengers.
So, we're asking today, should airlines weigh passengers and their bags before flying?
Well, joining us now is former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Steve, what do you think?
Oh, I applaud them. I have to say, though, they've kind of sounded very bold, Finnair have, by saying, you know, we're going to do this. But actually, when you look at the detail, it's voluntary. It's voluntary. And so what concerns me is they say it's for safety reasons. Fine, and I understand that. In fact, you know, all aviation experts would explain you've got to balance the weight, but they dilute it by saying that it's voluntary. So it's a lightweight policy. Excuse the pun.
Oh, Sarah, what do you think? Is it sensible to do this? It's about airline safety at the end of the day.
Well, like Steve just highlighted there, if it was about safety, then it wouldn't be voluntary. It would be mandatory. And they would be doing it because of the safety of the aeroplane. So it does make you question, actually, why are they actually doing this? And I think what we need to remember here is that what we're doing is perpetuating weight stigma here, actually, by making people stand on scales and be weighed, etc. So we need to think about people's mental health, about the impact on somebody, you know, having to go through that. So we need to just really weigh up again, excuse my pun, weigh up the consequences of making somebody do this versus is it really a necessity? So, yeah, I'm not a big fan, and I don't think it's really the right thing to do.
Oh, Steve, we need to be very careful about people's mental health.
Oh, well, we have to. That is true. And, you know, mental health, people with real mental health issues should be supported. Of course, I get that. But when it comes to the safety on a plane, if we're weighing, we're either doing it or we're not. And you know, we can't put feelings in front of facts, which is, the fact is, if the weight is wrong on the plane, apparently the plane could be in trouble and the safety of all of those passengers could be in trouble. This takes us, but of course, the elephant in the room, excuse the pun, is obviously also is very much about, should people that are too overweight and taking up another passenger's seat pay for two seats? And this will probably make me very unpopular, but I believe that they should. I do believe they should. It's not fair. And also, when I speak to most people that are too fat, I work with them every day, by the way, we don't wrap it up, they also say to me, do you know what, Steve? Yes, if I'm too fat, and I've had lots of ladies who've had to have the extension to the seatbelt say to me, you know, I'd rather pay for two seats, Steve.
And that's true, isn't it, Sarah? I mean, there's nothing worse than paying for your airline seat, which is always a bit of pinched anyway, and then finding that somebody is sitting next to you who is very, very large. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it, that we should probably pay for our obesity?
Well, it's an interesting comment there, because I think we are all paying for our obesity in many different ways, whether it's around, how we're made to feel every day, whether it's around, various different things. But I think what we need to remember here is that people that live with obesity are living with a chronic condition. So are we going to then start penalising people with other chronic conditions about, going on an aeroplane? I mean, I get the bit around if you don't fit into the seat properly and it's an uncomfortable flight. Understandably, I understand why people sitting next to you may feel uncomfortable and kind of think it's unfair. But fundamentally, what we need to change is the fact that aeroplane seats are too small for society in general. Because if that is happening more and more, then really what we need to be looking at is, should we be making aeroplane seats slightly bigger so it's more comfortable for the population, rather than actually making people feel bad? And I think that's how we've got to look at this, is what are we trying to achieve here? Are we just trying to make people feel bad for something that actually is out of their control in many, many ways, which I know Steve will disagree with me on, but actually fundamentally the science and the evidence tells us this? Or, do we actually make life a bit nicer for people and allow people to fly?
No, you're absolutely wrong. When you start talking about saying all the science says how hard it is to lose weight and, people can't lose weight, absolute cobblers. No one's fat in famine. And also to take away the empowerment of what we should be saying today is all of our nation, if they're overweight, can do something about it. Yes, there's different ways to take action to do something about it, but we must never, ever be telling our nation that if you're too fat, well, that's the way you are because the science says you'll always be fat. That's wrong. It disempowers people. It's cruel, actually. It's actually cruel to be saying that, I believe. And I think what we should be saying is, do you know what? If you are too fat, yes, it's challenging, but there is always something you can do about it. Start eating 80-20, 80% healthy, 20% what you fancy. Start sorting your head out as well. Get more interest, stimulate your mind, feed your mind rather than your stomach. So let's keep it positive for those people that are desperately trying to lose weight.
OK, Steve and Sarah, we've got to leave it there. Good to talk to you both this morning.
Yeah.
Thanks very much indeed.
It's going to be a contentious issue. I've got a statement from Finnair which says only the customer service agent working at the measuring point can see the total weight. So you can take part in the study with peace of mind.
Well, no, that sort of works, though. That sort of works. I can see why they're doing it voluntarily at the moment.
At the moment, but will it catch on?
I think it will.
When you're standing in the queue at the airport and you're waiting, to actually register or get your boarding pass or whatever, it's the amount of luggage that people bring with them.
Yeah.
And that's what weighs so much. I would have thought the sort of difference of a stone here and a stone there as to whether or not you fit into your little seat is nothing compared to the weight of the luggage. Some people take extortionate amounts of luggage.
Yeah, but we weigh more than the luggage.
No, I don't know whether we do.
I think we probably do. But anyway, let us know what you think. Straight-talking Steve or more sensitive Sarah on that one. Love to know your views. gbviews@gbnews.com. Aidan's here. Got the sport in just a moment, haven't you?
Yes, indeed. We were speaking to not one but two rugby heroes ahead of this afternoon's Six Nations clash between England and Wales at Twickenham. Stand by for that.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Ken, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or to St George's flag, so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country, and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody, and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
8:33, Aidan McGee's here.
Six Nations rugby, shall we have a chat about that?
Yeah, England-Wales. I mean, that's going to be an interest. Was that at Twickenham?
It is at Twickenham, yes, exactly. Well, England weren't too convincing last week. They were losing at half-time against Italy in Rome. But I'm going to get a new perspective on that, actually, from George Shooter, if he's available. If I can ask you, George, welcome to GB News. You'd have seen last week's game. I want to know where England are, where you think England are, because they were quite impressive in the World Cup, weren't they, in France before Christmas. They got probably further than we expected, but unconvincing last week against Italy. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the World Cup was good in terms of result, finishing third, and as you said, unexpectedly getting that far. Really, the performances weren't that convincing, if we're really honest. Having said that, last week against Italy, they were better. They certainly looked like they played a bit more rugby than they did in the World Cup, which was. Yeah, during the World Cup, they were a bit more forward-orientated, a bit more negative, and trying to sort of keep mistake-free rather than actually try and score points and tries. A bit more positive against Italy and scored a couple of tries. Yeah, they'll be disappointed with the way they defended. Conceding 3 tries is never particularly good, and as you say, they were losing the game until the last sort of 10, 12 minutes. So there are concerns, but I think positive signs really. Italy's a tough place to play. First up in the tournament, in particular, the crowds are very passionate out there. They're a good team. They're not a great team by any means, but they're a very good team. They're very good players individually, and early on in the tournament, they're certainly very motivated. So that's a pretty good result for England, considering how low they were on confidence and considering what's gone before them in the sort of previous 18 months. So I think they're off to a good start. This week today will be a slightly different kettle of fish, though.
And George, what about Wales? Because yes, they lost last week against Scotland, but had the match gone on for another 5-10 minutes, they might have turned it around against Scotland. It almost felt like a win at the end, didn't it? Yeah, the old game of two halves. A really good game, actually, really good game for the neutrals. Lots going on, lots to talk about, lots of action. Scotland came out of traps very, very sharply and looked good. They've been talking themselves up for a while, so they sort of lived up to that. But the Welsh, obviously, a little bit sluggish to start with and had a bit of a rocket at half-time, I would imagine, and they played very well in the second half. So I think this Welsh team's been written off. They've had a lot of retirees over the last few months and last year probably. They've got a few injuries, they've got a few unavailabilities, and they're under the radar. Everyone's assuming they're just going to be sort of battling for the wooden spoon this tournament. But I think the second half last week showed that they're a genuinely good team, a genuine contenders. Warren Gatland's one of the best coaches there's ever been, and he'll get the best out of every player in that squad. So yeah, England need to be very, very careful of that. I think the Welsh will come to Twickenham and they'll have no fears. Twickenham holds no fears for the Welsh.
quite a while now, and a lot of these younger guys they've got have never even played there, so it's not really there's not really much of a history to them. So I think if they can start the game as they finished last week, then England could be in for a real challenge here.
And George, more generally, just looking at the tournament more holistically, you'd have to make Ireland favourites now, especially after that result in France last Friday, even though France were installed as pre-tournament favourites.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually got that game completely wrong. I thought the French in Marseille would win that by 4 or 5 points. Couldn't have been more wrong. They actually sunk to a record loss at home in the tournament. So that's a tournament that's been going for them since about 1910, I think. So, I mean, a properly great performance by the Irish, and that's just sticking out on the pile of great performances they've had in the last 2 or 3 years. This run of theirs at #1 in the world, and they're obviously a little bit sore and salty after missing out the World Cup and losing the quarterfinals to New Zealand in another great game. So they've got extra motivation. And again, coaching wise, they've got a fantastic team. Andy Farrell just been appointed the British and Irish Lions coach for a very good reason. He's good. He's very good. So yeah, they've got all the ingredients, and they played a pretty much a mistake-free game for most of that game. 60, 70 minutes of that game, and the French. I don't think the French are a bad team at all. They're missing Antoine Dupont, who arguably is the best player in the world at the moment, but I'm not too sure he would have made that much difference, to be honest, as great as he is. I just think the Irish were so good. So, I mean, you can't imagine them slipping up at home to Italy this week, and the rest of the tournament, the rest of the teams in the tournament need to buck up their ideas, or they could be on the end of a hammering as well.
Look, George, thanks very much indeed for joining us. It's great to hear your observations on what we hope will be a thrilling match later today. We're underway at 4:45, of course, at Twickenham.
Thank you.
Yeah, should be interesting. Should be interesting. Mind you, can we move away from rugby football to football instead? Because we've been teasing us all morning with this news about Gareth Southgate.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he gave a briefing to the media on Thursday in Paris at the Nations League draw, and he hinted then that he might be prepared to stay after the Euros this summer. It had always been supposed or assumed that he might leave, irrespective of how England get on. He said that it would depend how England fared in the tournament. Now, on hearing that, apparently the FA were had their ears pricked up a little bit. They weren't actually that knowledgeable in terms of how he was feeling, and they're thinking, well, actually, if he does want to stay, depending on how they do, obviously, if they go out in the first round or something, then there's a different situation. But if he does want to stay and they do pretty well, I think they've got to get to the final, really, Stephen. Yeah. If I'm perfectly honest with you, in Germany, with all the players they've got. But if he does well, they're confident of keeping him, or they would like to keep him beyond that date.
About another couple of years, something like that.
Yeah, I think certainly to the World Cup 2026. Yeah. Yeah, certainly.
That'd be quite nice.
Are you fans of him?
We think so, don't we? But it's a worry that he's actually contemplating moving on.
Well, he's made it clear he didn't want to do it for all his life. Yeah, I mean, it's all right. It's not labour intensive in terms of matches every single week, but there's a hell of a lot of pressure on the England manager.
Yeah,
there really is.
He's done awfully well in that.
He has done pretty well.
And everybody likes him.
Yes, they do. Do you like him? You too?
Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Nice fella, isn't he?
Like his outlook. I like the things he's been able to say about the team being more important than any individual, and that seems to really work. No, I think he's a very likeable person, so it's hard to think who'd replace him.
A friend of mine grew up with him at Crystal Palace as youth team players, and they weren't sure whether he was going to make it. They weren't sure what position he was going to play. They only gave him a 6-month contract instead of 2 years, and they said, while we were all going out to Blue Orchid in Croydon on a Friday night, living it up before a reserve game the next day, Gareth Southgate was indoors with his mum drinking water.
Bless him.
Good on him.
Bless him.
Good on him.
Absolutely.
Here's a quick one about parking on the pavement.
Oh, yeah.
Caroline in Bath says, there is a simple solution to pavement parking. Get rid of all pavements. Let people park wherever they like, but give pedestrians priority on the roads. I don't think so, Caroline.
That comes back to those new roundabouts that aren't roundabouts, isn't it? There are areas, I know one in Oxford, where there's no priority given to anyone.
Really?
Drivers or pedestrians or anyone. The idea is that you all have to show respect to each other and wait for somebody to go by. Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know what they call them, but it's basically, there are no rules, there are no white lines. You just make your way tentatively.
Well, I don't like the sound of that, but maybe
apparently
I've not tried
they work.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Give it a whirl. I want to bump into Aidan's Jag, do you?
Can I just say, I did withdraw an offer for a house one time in Hale in Cheshire in 2010 because the road was so narrow that the cars were parked on both sides, and apparently the council or Cheshire East Council had written to all the householders saying they're all illegally parked.
Oh, in fact, we have already had an email from somebody who said, yeah, Gary in Plymouth, I have recently moved house because of people parking their cars without consideration for others on the pavement. It can really affect you, especially as well if you've got somebody, you know, your next door neighbour parking one of their cars right in front of your house too.
Ooh,
you know, and you're having to
going.
jockey for space at all. A lot of roads where people live simply aren't built for everybody to have a car.
No,
you don't want to damage your alloys either, do you?
No, you do. No, you've got to watch those alloys. Blooming heck. Under pressure, I'm all over the alloys.
Yes, very much so.
Anyway, look, we've got the papers heading your way in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight, our author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Time to take through the papers this morning at 8:45 with Emma Wolfe and Benedict Spence. Good to see you both this morning. Emma, the Times talking about COVID jabs. Oh, please.
Being sold.
I know,
Yes.
I know. Have we talked about anything else for the last 3 years? Pfizer and Moderna later in the year are going to be, they're in talks with some of the high street pharmacies to supply these so that basically the boosters were available the last few years to the over 65s and to sort of high-risk groups. But if you think about it, healthy, young, healthy, middle-aged people have not had any vaccination for 2 years now, since the national programme ended. So this now means that millions and millions of healthy young people can buy, if they want to. Can't imagine why anyone would want to go out and buy a vaccine, but if you want to...
No. You're not a big vaccine fan?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I did my 2 that I had to do, but no, I certainly wouldn't have gone anywhere near a booster. I think when you get to your 9th or your 10th booster, there's a clue in the name there. Something's not working.
But also, I mean, haven't most people actually had COVID by now?
They've had COVID, so they've probably got good immunity, unless they're at high risk, in which case I would assume they can
eligible
get
for the NHS.
Eligible in the NHS. I just can't imagine anything
It's not that
more.
easy. I'm eligible, but try and get older one.
Really?
Actually, through the NHS, it's not that easy.
I'm surprised at that, because I know people who are eligible who've been badgered and had many text messages. So it may be that it's a
recent one.
Postcode local.
I was going to say that's how things work in this country with health. Like if you live in one area, you might have very good access, and in another, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I've had most of them. The last one I just couldn't get hold of.
Oh, that's
So I'd buy it.
Would you buy it and do it?
Yeah, I'd buy it. Well, because you can buy flu jabs, can't you?
Yeah, you can.
So I'd do
exactly.
it.
And
I'll have one for you, Emma.
Thanks. You can have 9 for me if you want.
Right,
I don't need it.
Well, I think the
Haven't
point
had
is that
COVID.
if it's now over the counter and you can go and ask your pharmacist for it and pay for it, at least that's your choice.
Exactly. That's what I
Which
feel.
is
It is
good.
your choice, and it may be useful if you're going travelling or something, or you feel that you are going to an area you need it, or whatever, or your immunity is low. You've just had.
Yeah. Yeah, I might buy one for Bev Turner. For Valentine.
Oh, Bev. I think.
Morning, Bev. No, I don't think that.
Trouble in paradise.
But it's a nice thing we can agree to disagree.
Oh, yes. So politely.
And probably around the same price as a flu jab, probably around
Probably
15 to £20.
Yeah, well, it's not
So there
bad,
you
all
go.
things
That's all right for Bev's birthday present.
Yeah, she just had a birthday, actually, recently, didn't she? Save it for next year.
You missed it there, yeah.
Christmas. Guardian, Benedict.
Yes, this is the next stage in Israel's ground offensive in Gaza. This is the last sort of holdout, the last stronghold of Hamas, which is Rafah on the border with Egypt. Israel is preparing to evacuate civilians in that part of Gaza before it then begins its military operations. And understandably, people are warning that it could be devastating. The conflict has been fairly devastating, although I was reading stats earlier that show that they're actually much better at avoiding civilian casualties than the Russians have been in Ukraine, actually per head of population.
I didn't know well, to be fair, I didn't know the Russians were trying to avoid civilian casualties.
This is, I think, the problem. Warfare does kill an awful lot of civilians, however you go about it. And I think what we have seen is the difference between, and I know a lot of people have made all sorts of allegations about how Israel has conducted the war in this very built-up, very difficult urban area. But on the one hand, you've got, yes, exactly that example of the Russians sort of indiscriminately firing at people, Mariupol in particular, causing huge devastation and not particularly caring, and then blaming the Ukrainians for using civilians as human shields. Whereas the Israelis have gone to greater lengths than certainly the US or UK or anybody else has in recent times to avoid civilian casualties, and yet still so many have inevitably ended up dying. Although we do need to remember, as part of those sort of 26, 27, 28,000 figures, a lot of those are Hamas fighters as well. It's very, there is a lot of, in the fog of war,
Sometimes
a lot
they're
of that.
indistinguishable, aren't they?
Exactly. But the thing actually to take away from all of this is all of the warnings that we had about how it was going to be a disaster for the Israelis, they were going to get bogged down, it was going to be sort of street-to-street fighting, hasn't really materialised. From Israel's perspective, this has gone almost a little bit too well, in that we're now at the sort of the final stage, the assault on Rafah. And then what next?
Yes,
there is no end game, and that is the big criticism of the Netanyahu government. Actually, the invasion was very well planned. They've been planning for this sort of thing for a very long time. But how now do you extricate yourself from it? Do you just leave Gaza to its fate? Surely you can't do that. Do you leave an occupying force in? Tremendously difficult to do. Very angry population, obviously. That's not going to go down well. Of course, the US knows that from its attempts to sort of occupy and pacify Afghanistan.
This is what we always get, is no end game.
And there is no end point, because what Netanyahu vowed to do was to eliminate Hamas. And as we've said so many times, how do you eliminate an ideology? How do you? At what point do you say they are eliminated?
This argument I don't have so much time for, because you could have made the same argument about the Nazis in 1945. The Hitlerjugend and the Lebensborn have yet to resurrect the Fourth Reich. It didn't happen. Actually, if you kill enough people, it's a really nasty way of thinking about it. If you kill enough people, if you break the back of an organisation, its ideology can only survive in so much of a form. The key is then winning the peace afterwards, and that's where the criticism comes in. What is it exactly that the Israelis plan to do with Gaza? What role will the Palestinian Authority play? And also, what kind of pressures are going to be brought to bear on the Palestinian Authority, not by the West, but actually by other Arab governments to say to them, look, this can't keep going on. And actually what has really been noticeable, as much as they've been very vociferous in their support for the Palestinian people, there has been no suggestion at any stage that any of the other Arab governments or even Iran are going to come over the hill militarily to try to stop the Israelis doing what they're doing. There has been a sea change in what they're... Yeah, exactly. There has been a sea change in what a lot of those countries believe their role is, what they understand their capacities to be. Israel has won too many wars against overwhelming odds for any of these countries to risk alienating them. And a lot of them are just going there saying, well, look, we would jeopardise relations with the West, with the United States. It's just not worth doing.
Gosh, that's interesting.
Isn't it? Isn't it?
Shall we change tack utterly?
Oh, let's.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Emma, tell us about this chocolatey cookie for lovers.
Well, this is Domino. Weirdly, Domino, the pizza chain, has launched a chocolate chip cookie with a cream egg encased inside it. So I think you can see. I don't know if you can see on the screen, but if not, you can see there. You see
that's the cream egg that we're used to.
Next to it is
inside it. Here we have a chocolate chip cookie with a cream egg inside it.
Oh, yeah, we've got.
It almost looks like a Cornish pasty.
It looks like a Cornish pasty. So it's a big cookie. That's quite a big cookie. And anyway, but the funny thing is, Lord Bethel, who's a former health minister, has gone on this really extraordinary rant on Twitter saying this is absolutely disgusting, and he's gone for the executives at the company. He says these two corporations should be ashamed of themselves. People on Twitter have been saying, calm down, you're shouting at a cookie. He's really, really angry about this. I mean, yeah, it is.
Calm down, dear.
I don't know whether he's being serious and this is a serious health risk from a sort of health
I think he is. I saw him on GB News.
He's really quite angry about it, and he says these are serious corporate food companies. What are they thinking? The executive team, the board and the shareholders should be ashamed of themselves.
Except you're talking about
it's not illegal, but it's
in the business
harmful.
of chocolate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cadbury sells chocolate to us.
And Domino's sells
pizzas. So
it's hardly health food.
So they're hardly health food.
Exactly. In fact, they've got together, and it's for Valentine's, I presume, is it?
Oh, it's a limited edition, yes. Well,
Yeah.
I assumed it was for Easter. Oh, no, maybe it is for Valentine's. Oh, sorry, when we say green egg, it's for lovers. For lovers, yeah.
Well, that makes me
there we
furious.
go.
Do I have to share it with somebody, or can I just have to myself?
No,
I too.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's 370 calories for a cookie, so that is
including the egg.
Yeah, but that is quite a sweet treat. Yeah. But it's not 1,000 calories. It's not like these coffee chains, and I'm not going to mention any name, but if you buy an eggnog latte or a pumpkin latte at Christmas, those things can pack a serious punch. And people think they're a drink.
A friend of mine, I remember she really fancied a Marks and Spencer's rice pudding. She said, I always buy these. I have 2 or 3 of these a week. And when I looked at it, it was 4,500 calories.
Wow.
What?
It's made with real cream.
Well,
4,500 calories.
I mean, at least this is a dessert.
Wow.
You know this is your dessert, this is your cookie with a cream egg inside.
I think it's more than one.
I'm really
But it's not a coffee. It's not pretending to be a coffee.
I like Tonic's tea cakes, and now I have to just avoid looking at... I love them, they're so good, but I have to avoid looking at... Because you can taste... You don't need to look at the box, you can taste that there's a lot of calories in them.
Yeah, well, I have to say, we occasionally have a pizza night, and I will be ordering those.
You will?
I will.
You're going to try one? Brilliant. Let's have a photo.
I'm going to try because it
Give
just
us a review.
That will play havoc with your blood sugar.
Yeah, but the pizza does that anyway.
Cream egg is so sweet. Just the cream egg is just so sugary.
It takes me 24 hours to recover.
But you still do it.
Yeah, because I only do it once in a blue moon. Anyway, on that sweet and delicious note, thank you both. Great to see you this morning.
Thank you.
Oh, we've got 30 seconds. Oh.
Well, just time to say thank you very much, really.
Yeah. Well, I can feel my blood sugars going up, actually.
Well, you have to be super careful, don't you?
Just at the thought of that. Look at that. I'm in the
Will you watch a film whilst you're ordering the pizza?
Yeah, but we'll put a TV show on or something.
One of the ones on the list that you haven't seen yet. There's a raft of films.
We had a disagreement about Pretty Woman. I said it was the best film, and Anne said it was awful, and you've ruined it forever for me, and I'm very, very sad about that.
We do like to agree to disagree. Anyway, that's it. Get off, you two. Thanks very much indeed. Here's Aidan.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here for the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a cold start out there in Scotland, but it is turning milder from the south this weekend. A mix of rain, showers and some sunny spells. Some sunshine to begin the day across England and Wales, but frequent showers returning into Wales and the southwest by the afternoon, staying drier further east. Meanwhile, Scotland and Northern Ireland start cloudy, but some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, whilst the rain and hill snow continues to drive in across northeast Scotland, mostly turning back to rain by the end of the day. Feeling cold here, much milder elsewhere, back in the double figures widely away from central and northern Scotland. And that rain continues to drive into northeast Scotland during Saturday night. Snow confined to the tops of the mountains. Otherwise, for much of the UK, it's a blustery night with further showers or longer spells of rain moving in from the west, a lot of cloud cover, and as a result, for most, it is frost-free, temperatures staying in the mid to high single figures in many places. We start off Sunday with a lot of cloud, some mist patches around as well. Driest towards the east, some showers feeding in from the west, but as the day goes on, actually, an increased chance of the cloud breaking and at least some brighter interludes coming through. But always there'll be outbreaks of rain and showers feeding in from the west, drier to the east and mild across the board. Mid to high single figures in the north, 11 or 12 in the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Or they're trying to make it better, or they're trying to make it slower, a lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries on.
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course if the election is in November, by then the crossings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boat, certainly, or we'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information, ultimately, which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's the kind of, they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with countries on the continent, and this shows that the Tory PM can do them too.
And there may be intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much, much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against a backdrop of domestic
it's
loss?
interesting they could do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good morning to you. 9 o'clock, Saturday, the 10th of February, today.
It is our now main working theory that ezedi has actually gone into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. All of our work thus far has not seen him come off the bridge.
Police believe the Clapham chemical attack suspect, Abdul Ezedi, is most probably dead as the Met searches the River Thames.
The Prime Minister earned more than £2 million last year, according to his tax returns. So we're asking, does that really mean that he may well be out of touch with the ordinary British public?
My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I've become president.
Joe Biden pushes back against memory loss claims after an ally of his says he suffered the worst day of his leadership.
And powers to ban pavement parking should be extended right across England. That's according to councils around the country. Currently, it's only banned in London and in Scotland.
Finnair announces it's going to ask passengers to weigh themselves along with their carry-on luggage in order to better estimate the plane's weight before takeoff. But is this fat shaming?
And a medicinal marijuana firm has found that their customer base has increased by 1,000% over the last year, and they think it's something to do with the growing NHS patient waiting lists. One mother whose daughter suffers from a genetic disorder told us of her plight.
Trying to find medication for her epilepsy, and we've found that medicinal cannabis is the only thing that is keeping her alive.
A mixed weekend of weather to come. There'll be some rain, there'll be some showers, but there'll also be some sunny spells. Full details coming up in the forecast.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
I saw you grabbed the emails, Anne. I'm wondering where you're going to start, because we've got so many.
Honestly, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much for getting in touch. At least we know you're out there. Yeah, Andy says, I travelled from Spain this week. There were two enormous fat people travelling together. You could not have got another passenger in the third seat. This is about weighing people before they get on the aircraft.
Barbara says, my view is that if someone is excessively overweight, then buy 2 seats.
Yeah, Jimmy in Plymouth, morning Jimmy, says, fat people should be banned from flying and made to go on holiday by boat.
I think that might be a bit much.
Well, absolutely.
But interestingly, we're going to show you, repeat the debate, actually, that we had a little time ago, but the lady on there saying, well, it's not right. You know, we need to... Fat people, you know, you just need to have bigger seats. But no, I mean, maybe the argument is actually they should even be thinner seats, because then you really will have to do something about your size. And as Steve Miller said, you know, look, everyone can lose weight. You have to do it.
It's not easy, though.
It's not easy, no.
It really is.
And you have to go about it in different ways. But he's an expert on this, and it's all about your physical health. It's not about fat shaming.
No,
it's
it
about,
mustn't be.
But it's about being healthy, isn't it? And encouraging people to have a healthy life.
Richard, a former BA captain, says, I used to fly a 12-seater aircraft on the Highlands and Islands routes in Scotland. We did weigh the passengers then, as the aircraft is so significantly smaller. And, of course, when they started commercial flights, they always used to weigh people.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh, right, so it's only... It's only back to the same,
Well, they were smaller
then.
planes. They were before the days of jets, so it was always propeller craft. And they were much smaller in those days, yeah.
Yeah.
Paul says, brilliant idea. I've always said it's fair to charge passengers and their luggage as one.
Well, I can see the sense. I don't know. I don't know how you'd actually implement that, but it's.
Well, you would. You'd get on with your luggage. I think not just your hand luggage, your luggage, and then you're just taking it. So you don't. They don't have to say it's you that's too heavy. It's they're taking
the whole thing.
And your luggage as a whole weight.
I do think it's. We've reached a point where being overweight or obese, really, we've reached a point where people are too frightened to say anything, and everything's classed as shaming. Whereas, in fact, it's why I quite like Steve Miller, because he does just say it as it is, and say you're. I mean, lardy. He said the other day, you're lardy, so something needs to go. And actually, I lost a load of weight once because. Actually, it was Polly Middlehurst who works, when we worked together somewhere else. She went, oh, you're looking really fat. Because she doesn't mince her words, doesn't Polly?
Clearly.
She says, you're looking really fat. You've put loads of weight on. Well, I wasn't very happy, but it did make me go on a diet.
But
So
when
there
you
you
go
go
on a diet, you can lose weight, can't you?
Yeah, but the older I get, the longer it takes.
Please tell me about it. It really is very slow business, yeah.
But, you know, but at least it means I've got the focus that I'm never going to be as thin as I used to be. But at least I think, well, at least I'm being as healthy as I can be for...
One of our beautiful, lovely viewers made the point, and I'm not going to be able to find it now.
Right.
She said, wouldn't it be awful if you're going on your holiday and you're weighed, and that could be embarrassing enough, but when you come back from your holiday and you're weighed again, wouldn't it be awful if you put on an awful lot of weight?
Ah.
And as you know, I like my cruises, and they do say...
Do you put weight on a cruise?
You're meant to put on £1 a day on a cruise.
Are you?
I don't mean you're meant to, but you do, because you can't help it. The food is so brilliant.
Oh, dear.
£1 a day.
Well, that's a
There
lot.
would be a significant difference between going on holiday and coming back, wouldn't there? Wouldn't it be awful if the airline said to you, I'm sorry, you can't go home?
Oh,
you
yeah,
can't
that'd
go
be a
home,
shame.
you put on too much weight.
Well, that'd be a way. You just have to get the boat to bring you back.
Well,
like what's his face said? Jimmy.
Yes, that's
Jimmy,
right.
please come back by boat. There you go. Right.
Let us know what your views are, and we'll show you the debate again a bit later because it's got everybody really going. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Now, police are claiming that the suspect in the Clapham chemical attack may have jumped into the River Thames as the manhunt continues. I say manhunt, they're now really focusing on finding a body. Now, they're that sure of this. This is what the Metropolitan Police Commander John Saville said yesterday.
The last 24 hours, we have meticulously been viewing all of the available CCTV in and around the Chelsea Bridge area. And we've also worked with Transport for London in accessing the CCTV from their buses. It is our now main working theory that ezedi has actually gone into the Thames from Chelsea Bridge. All of our work thus far has not seen him come off the bridge. We are in contact with his family in order to pass that news on and to provide the necessary information and support for them, because, of course, I'm sure they will also be very worried about what's happened to him and what he has done.
Well, of course, all of this comes after officers did raid 2 Tyneside properties on Thursday, thought to be connected to the attack. Ezedi, of course, is wanted for attempted murder after throwing that chemical substance on a woman, 31-year-old woman, and her 2 children. And, by the way, injuring 9 other people too.
Oh, dear. Well, what do you make of all of this? Is it the police? Is it a cop-out from the police and we can't find him, therefore he must have gone into the river? Or is it a bit more solid than that? Let's talk to former police officer Harry Tan. Good to see you this morning, Harry. But what's your assessment of this? You know how these things work.
Yeah, I've been following it quite carefully. And, yeah, I've heard things like, well, you know, you can hide in London. No, you can't if you're the most famous individual with a facial injury like he has in London. I don't think you'd be able to move an inch. And I think what I do know is that London is probably one of the most covered with CCTV in the world. And I also know, you just mentioned those buses. Now, I've worked with buses with fatal road traffic collisions. They are incredibly detailed and clear CCTV on all areas of the buses. And you know how many buses there are in London. So I'm absolutely convinced now that ezedi, as was stated by Mr. Saville there, that he was walking with quite with purpose. It's only a 36-minute walk, but 4 hours later he turns up on Clapham Bridge, walking with purpose, and then he's walking to and fro in the centre of the bridge, and then he's last seen looking over the edge of the bridge. I think we have to say the hypothesis, as we would have said, is very much that that is what he's done, because he hasn't disappeared into thin air unless he has scaled, you know, like Spider-Man, a building, of which they were sort of hinting at. Now, if he has gone into the river, then you're talking about 3 to 5 days before a body raises, not getting too much detail, but it's all the gases and things. But I was a few years ago, I was with the Marine Department in Newcastle, which ironically is where ezedi was living at before this. And they said they often pick up bodies very near the bridge where people jump off, and they get snagged in, again, not in too much detail, but there's a lot of debris in the bottom of the riverbed, and bodies very easily get snagged, and they might not travel very far, but if they do, you're literally talking about the sea, and you may never recover that body at all. That's very realistic.
I imagine, though, the police divers who will be recruited for this search are very used to the Thames, and they'll know, won't they, what the likelihoods are, what the probabilities are of a body being snagged, as you say, or moving about. It's very tidal, the river there, and so, you know, the water raises 8, 12 feet sometimes. So, but they'll know the river so well, won't they?
Yes, Anne, and I'm in awe of these divers. I mean, they are absolute. Sometimes I wonder if they're human, because they are working against horrendous currents, and often when you're literally a metre above the riverbed, it's black. You can't see your hand in front of your face, and sometimes they say you actually put the dials against their masks to see what they are. So it's all touch, and that's not a very pleasant job, but it's all touch at certain levels. And so they will have a grid process where they are searching. Don't think for a second you're going down there and it's like being in the Mediterranean. You've got a clear view and you can see all around you. It's just not the case. It's a very difficult job.
The problem with this is, I mean, we've talked to several former police officers today, Harry, and they're all agreeing with what you're saying. They're all sure that ezedi is dead. Is in the river somewhere. The problem is, it still leaves it slightly open-ended, doesn't it? Particularly for the victims in this. They will never quite know unless a body is recovered.
Yeah, I mean, people want closure, don't they? And I think the public are watching something going on, and they are detached from it. They have great empathy with the women and the children involved, and even the police officers who are injured. But but if we're quite frank, people can often want the film to end, and they want a conclusion, because that's what we're used for. And we are detached from the reality of what actually is being suffered by these individuals. And so I worked with many fatal road traffic collisions, and it wasn't always finding out who was at fault, but why and what happened, so there was closure. And so the police will be really working hard for that, because that is so important for the people involved, especially the mother and the 2 children, without a shadow of a doubt. But yeah, I think everything's looking towards that way. He was so injured, he would have needed to sought help. He would have been in absolute agony. And I don't think he was the sort of individual, from what we've heard, that would warrant this huge backup by colleagues to get him out of the country and all these things that have been mentioned. He's just some guy who did an awful thing. And I think that's human nature. He felt there was no way out. He was in a lot of pain. He thought about it for a moment, and then he disappeared.
OK, Harry Tan, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, and I hope for the sake of the victims, it's a terrible thing to find yourself saying, but I do hope that if he did go in the river, I hope they find his body.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that at least they'll know.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, for that sense of closure. But so the reality is, will they ever find him? But I know there will be people watching and listening right now. Indeed, some of our guests on the QT have said, "Oh, I don't believe it. It's just the police covering themselves." Actually, when you speak to all these
We've spoken to so many this morning, so many very, very experienced police.
And they are... decades behind them. They're all saying,
yeah.
He's dead. He's dead. So I think you've got to take some comfort.
And it's interesting, even in that little bit of video we showed, where you could see him crossing the road and going towards the bridge, a bus went past there. And so the police will have tracked that bus down, looked at its video.
And he must have been in, actually, a tremendous amount of pain with that burn.
He must have been, although in the sequences we've seen, the little CCTV grabs that we've seen, he doesn't walk as though he's in terrible pain.
No, but
it's mystifying, isn't it?
But you sort of wonder if it takes a while to kick in. It's a bit like people say, if you get shot, it doesn't hurt to begin with. You know, your body, your adrenaline and everything, all just covers it all up.
Yeah. You can't tell, can you? You can't.
You can't tell, but, you know...
I just hope for the sake of the victims they get some sort of closure on this.
Let's hope so. They've still got an awful lot to go through.
Yeah.
Especially the mother in all of this.
And I don't like the idea of her. She's got such a recovery ahead of her. And it is said that she'll lose the sight in one eye. And goodness only knows what that sort of horrible chemical attack has done to her face. She's got to live with that. She doesn't need the fear as well of thinking he's still around.
No, absolutely.
OK, at 9:15, let's move on. The latest tax records have shown that the Prime Minister earned over £2 million last year, which amounted then to over £500,000 he had to pay in tax.
Yeah, now, apparently, this all meant that he paid an overall tax rate of 23% in the UK. Now, that's because it wasn't income, wasn't money for his job, or most of it anyway. It was capital gains from investments, so that is taxed at a different rate, and certainly not the 45% tax rate that top income people pay.
And of course, you don't need me telling you, this comes as most people in the country are facing a cost of living crisis. And it does beg the question, doesn't it, of whether the Prime Minister can possibly empathise with most people who are having a rough time of it at the moment.
Let's talk to Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, Sir John Curtis. Good to see you, as always, John.
Good morning.
What do you make of all of this? Because it's not about the reality, it's about the optics, isn't it?
Well, I think the first thing I want to say is that Mr. Sunak is clearly a lucky man. He is clearly very rich. His wife, by reputation, is also very rich. And I suppose one could say that, given, frankly, he's not reliant on his income as Prime Minister, or indeed he need not necessarily be reliant on the income from any job he might do. In a sense, he can certainly argue that he's engaging in public service. That said, of course, what his wealth has long been used for, occasionally by his opponents, although, of course, it's a very narrow line to tread between seemingly engaging in unnecessary personal attack and casting doubt on his judgment, as to whether or not occasionally it does mean that he seems somewhat out of touch. And I suppose it was exemplified a couple of occasions, for example, when he seemingly didn't know how to use a contactless card. But at the end of the day, one suspects that the public's judgment of him as a Prime Minister is not going to rely heavily on his personal wealth and his personal fortune, but rather on how good a job they think he's doing as Prime Minister. And the real problem he faces is that so far, at least, the public reaction to his Prime Minister has been one that's become increasingly negative, as a result of which his party's position in the opinion polls is little better than it was when he first became Prime Minister.
I mean, obviously, we're going into a general election at some point, and it will be interesting to see whether or not, particularly Labour, use this as a stick with which to beat him. Because actually, when it comes to scrutiny, it looks as though quite a few of the major faces on the Labour front bench are also pretty rich.
Well, sure. The honest truth is these days, if you want to get into politics and to become an MP, you need to have quite a lot of money, because you've probably got to be willing to fall out of employment for a while you're standing as a candidate, and then you have to hope to get the job. Becoming an MP has become an expensive business. It is one now where very few people from what we would once call a working class background now manage to reach. And, that raises questions about the overall representation of the House of Commons. And of course, insofar as one might say that occasionally the odd Labour attack on Mr. Sunak seemingly out of touch, well, we could argue about whether it's ethical or not. Equally, of course, sometimes the attempt by some Conservative MPs to suggest that because Sir Keir Starmer is secure, that somehow or another that indicates some degree of privilege or wealth. Well, here I can speak personally. I can tell you that simply because you have a knighthood doesn't tell you anything at all about how well off somebody is.
Well, there you go. Oh, I'd love to delve a bit deeper into that with you, John. Yeah. Look, really good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Interestingly, Fiona in Milton Keynes has been in touch and says, it annoys me when people say the PM is out of touch because he's rich. Arguably, he's the most decent and moral Prime Minister we've ever had.
Yeah, and Mark says this country would be much better off with more like him paying lots of tax.
Well, it's a fair point, actually. It all goes into the coffers.
Yeah.
Well,
you'll be with him on Monday.
I will be with him on Monday. And I was going to say, if you want to ask him about his finances, well, why not? You could do so on Monday as the Prime Minister takes part in our special People's Forum live on GB News. It's going to be an hour, and he will take questions directly from our studio audience. So if you want to be part of that, you can. You go to gbnews.com/PM to register your interest, or you can scan that QR code if you're watching on TV that you can see on your screen right now.
Meanwhile, let's get the weather forecast from Aidan McGivern.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here for the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a cold start out there in Scotland, but it is turning milder from the south this weekend. A mix of rain, showers and some sunny spells. Some sunshine to begin the day across England and Wales, but frequent showers returning into Wales and the southwest by the afternoon, staying drier further east. Meanwhile, Scotland and Northern Ireland start cloudy, but some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, whilst the rain and hill snow continues to drive in across northeast Scotland, mostly turning back to rain by the end of the day. Feeling cold here, much milder elsewhere, back in the double figures widely away from central and northern Scotland. And that rain continues to drive into northeast Scotland during Saturday night. Snow confined to the tops of the mountains. Otherwise, for much of the UK, it's a blustery night with further showers or longer spells of rain moving in from the west. A lot of cloud cover. And as a result, for most, it is frost-free. Temperatures staying in the mid to high single figures in many places. We start off Sunday with a lot of cloud, some mist patches around as well. Driest towards the east, some showers feeding in from the west, but as the day goes on, actually, an increased chance of the cloud breaking and at least some brighter interludes coming through. But always there'll be outbreaks of rain and showers feeding in from the west, drier to the east and mild across the board. Mid to high single figures in the north, 11 or 12 in the south.
Now, there's still plenty of time for you to have a chance, at least, to win £18,000 cash, tax-free, in our Great British Giveaway. Here are the details you need.
This is your chance to win £18,000 cash in our very latest Great British Giveaway. Cash to spend on anything you like. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. What would you use that for?
Well, congratulations, you've won £10,000.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable. That's brilliant news.
For another chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd of February. Good luck.
Do stay with us. Really interesting debate to come. Should airlines weigh you before you get on?
Possibly.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
Yeah.
But I'm all right with with people, because you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too. I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Now, a Finnish airline has announced it will ask passengers to weigh themselves at the airport in order to better estimate the plane's weight before takeoff.
It's Finnair, and they defended their controversial move, saying that the information will be used to balance the flight better. However, travellers have said that the plan is cruel and it will cause embarrassment to overweight passengers.
So we've been asking if it's really the right thing to do.
Applaud them. I have to say, though, they've kind of sounded very bold, Finnair have, by saying, you know, we're going to do this. But actually, when you look at the detail, it's voluntary. It's voluntary. And so what concerns me is they say it's for safety reasons. Fine, and I understand that. In fact, you know, all aviation experts would explain you've got to balance the weight, but they dilute it by saying that it's voluntary. So it's a lightweight policy. Excuse the pun.
Oh, Sarah, what do you think? Is it sensible to do this? It's about airline safety at the end of the day.
Well, like Steve just highlighted there, if it was about safety, then it wouldn't be voluntary. It would be mandatory. And they would be doing it because of the safety of the aeroplane. So it does make you question, actually, why are they actually doing this? And I think what we need to remember here is that what we're doing is perpetuating weight stigma here, actually, by making people stand on scales and be weighed, etc. So we need to think about people's mental health, about the impact on somebody, you know, having to go through that. So we need to just really weigh up, again, excuse my pun, weigh up the consequences of making somebody do this versus is it really a necessity? So, yeah, I'm not a big fan, and I don't think it's really the right thing to do.
Oh, Steve, we need to be very careful about people's mental health.
Oh, well, we have to. That is true. And, you know, mental health, people with real mental health issues should be supported. Of course, I get that. But when it comes to the safety on a plane, if we're weighing, we're either doing it or we're not. And you know, we can't put feelings in front of facts. Which is, the fact is, if the weight is wrong on the plane, apparently the plane could be in trouble and the safety of all of those passengers could be in trouble. This takes us, but of course the elephant in the room, excuse the pun, is obviously also is very much about should people that are too overweight and taking up another passenger's seat pay for 2 seats. And this will probably make me very unpopular, but I believe that they should. I do believe they should. It's not fair. And also, when I speak to most people that are too fat, I work with them every day, by the way, we don't wrap it up, they also say to me, do you know what, Steve? Yes, if I'm too fat, and I've had lots of ladies who've had to have the extension to the seatbelt say to me, you know, I'd rather pay for 2 seats, Steve.
And that's true, isn't it, Sarah? I mean, there's nothing worse than paying for your airline seat, which is always a bit of pinched anyway, and then finding that somebody is sitting next to you who is very, very large. I mean, It makes sense, doesn't it, that we should probably pay for our obesity?
Well, it's an interesting comment there, because I think we are all paying for our obesity in many different ways, whether it's around, how we're made to feel every day, whether it's around, various different things. But I think what we need to remember here is that people that live with obesity are living with a chronic condition. So are we going to then start penalising people with other chronic conditions about, going on an aeroplane? I mean, I get the bit around if you don't fit into the seat properly and it's an uncomfortable flight. Understandably, I understand why people sitting next to you may feel uncomfortable and kind of think it's unfair. But fundamentally, what we need to change is the fact that aeroplane seats are too small for society in general. Because if that is happening more and more, then really what we need to be looking at is, should we be making aeroplane seats slightly bigger so it's more comfortable for the population, rather than actually making people feel bad?
Oh, this has got you going. I must say, Barbara has emailed in saying, how is it fat-shaming to ensure that a plane isn't too heavy for safety reasons?
Mary says, I'm not obese, I'm size 12, but I weigh over 60 kilograms. A lot of people these days are almost twice my size. Imagine what they weigh.
Absolutely. And Dean says, all right, get around this by having private weighing rooms. How to slow down the queue even more.
Well, yeah. Phil says putting bigger seats in aircraft means fewer seats, higher prices, and air travel only for the wealthy, overweight people. Well.
Yeah. I mean, there's a very good point here. David in Portchester, morning, David, says, I don't really want to generalise, but isn't weighing passengers something the US-based airlines should be doing?
Wow.
There's no doubt there are countries where the obesity rate, but we're getting to that situation as well. Our obesity problem is huge at the moment.
Barbara says, how is ensuring a plane isn't too heavy for safety reasons fat shaming?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's balance as well. It's all about balance.
Yeah, Julie says, I'm 5 foot and I weigh 8 stone, so you're little. I sat next to a man once who was taking up, his seat, but also half my seat, and he couldn't see a problem with that. He must have weighed more than me and my suitcase combined.
Yeah. Just a quick one. Stephen Bracknell, weighing passengers is simple and safe. It can be done as you go through the metal detection system. It's all good, actually.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Anyway, the head of ground processes at Finnair, Satu Manuka, said only the customer service agent working at the measuring point can see the total weight, so you can participate in the study with peace of mind.
Yeah, but as others have pointed out, if you've already booked your seat, and in many airlines you pay extra for choosing your seat before you get your boarding pass and everything, then are they going to ask you to move about?
Yeah, I should think so, because they do that sometimes anyway. If the flight isn't very full, they get you to move about.
Yeah.
Don't they? So
I haven't been on a flight recently that's been anything other than packed to the rafters. Everybody seems to want to fly it at the moment, don't they?
Anyway, let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, next we're going to look into medicinal cannabis, which a lot of the people think is... there's been something like 1,000% take-up of medicinal cannabis. Why? Apparently because of the long NHS waiting lists. So people are self-medicating on cannabis. We'll look into that next.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama. And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting, and that you had, obviously I was in no pain or anything like that, I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions. We did not experiment with nitrogen, but what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, the boss of a medicinal cannabis company has said the number of people buying their product has increased by 1,000% in the last year.
And they have attributed that to the long NHS waiting lists, which is meaning that lots of people are now choosing to self-medicate.
Well, medical marijuana was legalised in the UK in 2018, but only under certain circumstances.
Our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper, paid a visit to a patient who now relies on medical cannabis to get him through the day.
Morning.
Come on in. Morning. When you're in pain, it controls all your thoughts.
Over a decade ago, when he was aged just 29, Richard developed chronic pain. He dealt with it for a number of years before he found medical cannabis. Since then, he says his life has changed.
When you're in pain, that's all you can think about. That's it. When you wake up, you're in pain. But medical cannabis just gives you that break. And not just physically, mentally, it gives you a mental break.
After the chronic pain began, unable to function as he once had, Richard was forced to close his barber shop. But with the help of medical cannabis, he says he was able to reopen a new shop at his home.
Medical cannabis, it gives you that life back. It gives you that little bit of strength, a little bit of, even if it's for an hour, it's like you've got yourself back for 1 hour. And that, in 10 years, for having pain for 10 years, is amazing.
For Richard, his life is now back on track. However, as a relatively new product on the market, many would perhaps be sceptical about how medical cannabis actually works.
Cannabis is one of the only medicines which is able to communicate and interact with a person's endocannabinoid system to help alleviate various issues such as appetite, sleep, mood, and that is effectively how medical cannabis is able to benefit various conditions.
There are now an estimated 35 to 40,000 patients in the UK being prescribed medical cannabis, with research showing it has the power to improve a patient's quality of life by over 50%.
Quite a lot of our patients are feeding back that medical cannabis has been life-changing for them. They don't have the side effects, they feel much better, they're able to get on with their everyday lives.
Medical cannabis was legalised here in the UK back in 2018, and with Mar Medica reporting a 1,250% increase to their number of patients since the start of last year, could the public's perception of this drug be shifting?
I think it'd be preferable to using like a harsher intervention. As far as I know, it just seems more natural to me.
Personally, I would, because I've just heard a lot about like the benefits.
I would, but I'd be scared, well, not so concerned whether or not I get dependent on it at all.
I wouldn't myself, but for somebody who's in a great deal of pain, I think it's probably good.
If it's prescribed by the doctor and under medical supervision, yeah, I've definitely used it, and I think that's how it should be used.
Just over 5 years ago, the use of medical cannabis would have been seen as a criminal offence. But now, as times continue to change, it seems that what was once taboo is now becoming the tried and tested. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Yeah, I think that's very true, isn't it? We were just saying during that report that times will change. Maybe in 20 years' time, we'll see it as completely acceptable to pop a cannabis pill or something like that.
It'd be taking one it'd be like taking a vitamin in the morning. I
wonder,
think.
yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me.
It's almost likely, isn't it? Now, earlier on, we spoke to medicinal cannabis campaigner Emma Appleby, because her daughter Tegan has a very rare chromosomal disorder.
We've been trying to find medication for her epilepsy, and we've found that medicinal cannabis is the only thing that is keeping her alive. We've run out of it twice in the last 5 years, and both times she ended up in intensive care in a coma, fighting for her life, basically. So she needs it. It's not the fact that it helps her, it's the fact that it's keeping her with us and it's keeping her safe.
And, I mean, before medicinal cannabis was legalised, what were you able to do for her to help her condition?
Not a lot. It was basically just comfort her as much as you could, but she spent a lot of her time in intensive care with before medical cannabis. In 2018, she spent 3 months in London. Basically, the doctors didn't know what to do. There was nothing else they could try. And that's kind of where we are again now. I've been fighting for 5 years to get a prescription on the NHS, and it's costing me up to £2,000 a month privately. And that's kind of where I've been for 5 years.
So at the moment, you have to pay privately in order to get it. But it is legally, you are legally able to do that, but you can't get it on the NHS.
No, so it was legal. So there is a medication called Epidiolex, which was legalised in 2018, but that's only for two different conditions. Tegan has got one of those conditions, but unfortunately, Epidiolex on its own is not enough to help Tegan. She needs the THC combination.
Fascinating, isn't it?
It is. Let us know what you think about that one. Anyway, coming up, something to cheer you up. We've got a Valentine's special Fake or Fact with Andrew Ebor. We don't know what's coming. We'll find out with you in just a moment.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you,
sure,
and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, 1 year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951,
years,
whatever
right.
it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, love is in the air, Anne.
Well, I suppose Valentine's Day is coming up.
It is. Wednesday, in case you've forgotten, or you need to go and buy something, rapido.
Are you prepared?
Yes, I'm prepared.
Right.
Fully prepared. Everything's sorted and organised.
Yeah, lovely.
So there we go. So.
And my boys are past the date when they want to get anything from their mum on Valentine's Day. You go through that when they're very little.
Yeah, that's always quite nice.
You can't do it when they're 30 plus.
You can.
They've got their own love lives. They don't need me sending them a Valentine
With a
card.
question mark.
Yeah. God, no.
Yes,
they would hate that. Yeah.
Oh, it's really nice.
Would also cause a row or two, wouldn't it?
Well, it
I mean,
might
if you
do.
got a Valentine's card, if I sent you one with a question mark in it, wouldn't that cause a bit of a problem at home?
Yeah, it would, actually.
Yeah, because your other half would say, hang on a minute,
I once got... You know Nikki Chapman? From Pop Stars and all that stuff. She sent me a Valentine's card once.
Oh, that's nice.
Really cheeky, really rude one.
Oh.
And I had no idea who it was from, and she told me years later it was her.
Oh.
It's just causing a bit of trouble.
Yeah, she probably liked doing that.
Anyway, look, if you want to know about all things Valentine, what is true and what isn't, let's talk to Andrew Eborn with Fake or Fact. Good morning.
Hello, Kung Hei Fat Choi, Happy New Year, Year of the Dragon, the fire-breathing dragon, fire of passion. And I thought, absolutely, we should talk about Valentine's.
Yeah.
Now, every time, Twitter goes crazy with Valentine's things, and all sorts of rumours start spreading again, most of which is about the eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, which always gets quoted. It's the film with Jim Carrey and his character, exactly. And Joel, he says, today's a holiday invented by greeting card companies. So, is that fake or fact?
Ooh, I think that's fake.
I think that's fake because there was a Saint Valentine. Now, quite what he had to do with lovers, I don't know.
No, I don't.
Well, you're both right. I'll give you both a point for that. It is true, unfortunately, all the lovers within us and at home. And actually, it went all the way back to Lupercalia, is what it was the original fertility festival around this sort of time, from 13th to the 15th. So it's a pagan festival to start off. And the reason they picked this time of year, it's when the birds used to start mating. And so all the lovebirds, and Chaucer mentions about lovebirds and things like that. But actually, there were a number of saints, so a number of Valentines. It wasn't just one. There's about three of them. The one story I love, and we were talking about this earlier in the break, about growing up as a wonderful Catholic girl. I didn't, but I think you might have done.
Whether I was a wonderful Catholic girl, I really don't.
What I loved about it, so what he was a Valentine in the 3rd century. He was a priest.
Yeah.
And he was at the time when Christians were being sort of sent everywhere. And what happened is the Roman emperor said, you can't get married if you're going to be in the army because it exhausts you if you're married.
All right.
And so
he probably had a point.
So what Valentine used to do, he used to marry them in secret until he was found out and he was thrown in jail. And whilst in jail, he fell in love with the jailer's wife. Or not the wife, the daughter, don't be even more scandalous. I fell in love with the daughter who was apparently blind, and he cured her blindness and that sort of thing. But the night before he was executed, he wrote her a lovely little note saying, from your Valentine. And that was the story. Isn't that glorious? And there's a picture of him and everything else. And you can find his skull. It's always a bit dramatic when they like these relics.
Yeah,
you can find his skull in Rome, and there's a little picture of that, I think, we've got somewhere as well.
Oh,
so it was, in fact, entirely true. There was a St. Valentine. We celebrated today and things like that as well.
And he sent a lovely note to his
Isn't that lovely? And as I said, one from the heart, unrequited love, because he never obviously was in jail. He was decapitated and all that sort of thing, rather dramatic. Right, the earliest Valentine message in history dates back to 1415, the Battle of Agincourt. That's always a little thing that's sent around this sort of time. What do you think? Fake or fact? Battle of Agincourt, 1415, the first earliest Valentine message.
Fake.
Fake?
Fact.
Fact. Very interesting, because a lot of people would agree with Anne, because what they say, Charles, Duke of Orleans, it was the Battle of Agincourt. He was one of the royal family, and he was thrown into the Tower of London. And there's lots of pictures of him and so on and so forth, writing to his then-wife, Bonne of Armagnac. I like a good Armagnac, and so did he. Apparently he wrote a little love letter, and there's pictures of that. And there's even pictures in that sort of stuff. And people regurgitate it all of the time this time of year, including the fact-checking sites.
Oh, really?
And they all say, no, Anne's absolutely right, and things like, I dug a bit deeper. You know, here on Andrew Eborn's Fake or Fact, I went along to the British Library, where they have the original manuscript of the poem that he wrote, and it's in French. Je suis déjà d'amour tanné, ma très douce Valentine. There we go. Now we can translate that, which basically says, I'm wearied by love, my very sweet Valentine. Right. So this was the letter, but it was actually written a long time after his wife died. So it wasn't written in the Tower of London. What they said at the British Library is that actually it was written when he went back to France, and it was actually an anti-Valentine, because he said he can't take part in what used to be the Valentine's Day lottery. And the lottery is basically you get paired up with people around Valentine's Day and you have to support them and things like that. Ooh. So he was actually an anti-Valentine. It wasn't the first Valentine. So Stephen is right, so he gets his point. He's leading this week. Excellent. Fantastic. The very first one, however...
Ignorant guess.
As well. It was... The very first one, which is still in existence, was from 1477. I think we've got a picture of that as well. And it was an intimate letter from two lovebirds, Marjorie Bruce, and we've got a picture of that, I think, as well. Somewhere in the gallery. There we go. And you can read that. It's a little eye test for people at home. But that was the earliest one that's still in existence from 1477.
Because you said Valentine himself was in the 3rd century.
Yes.
4th century. And all those years later, all those centuries later, people are still sending Valentine.
Isn't that lovely? And Chaucer, as I say, he did it. You had in Shakespeare's time, Ophelia talks about my sweet Valentine, and so on and so forth.
Wow, what a legacy.
Isn't it wonderful? Yeah. First mass-produced one, however, here's the thing, mass-produced was not until 1849. Hundreds and hundreds of years later. Is that fake or fact?
I think that's fake, because I think it would be actually much later than that.
OK.
Because Christmas cards and things didn't come about till later than that.
No, you're right, absolutely, on Christmas cards. We've looked at that. Anne, what do you think?
No, I think that's a fact.
You think it's a fact? Well, Anne is absolutely right. It is a fact. And do you remember the person who it was? The first American lady was. Her name was Esther Howland. Here's a picture of her. This is Esther. She looks a bit... she looks young. But she was 19 when she received a Valentine's Day card.
She looks delighted.
She was so relieved.
Thrilled.
It was apparently one of her father's colleagues. Which was not, yes, quite. But she liked the idea so much that she came up with all these elaborate ones. And this is the first lace ones.
Lacy ones.
And they had, I think I sent a few pictures of those. Aren't they glorious?
They are beautiful.
And you have little messages and so on and so forth. And basically, she was called the mother of American Valentine. And this is way before Hallmark. Hallmark were not until 1910. She had all that sort of stuff, which was beautiful. Right, flowers. We've got time for flowers?
Oh, yes, we have.
So Valentine's Day flowers dates back to the 17th century. 17th century. Is that fake or fact?
Flowers.
I'm going fact.
OK.
I'll go fact as well.
Well, you're both right. Do you know what it's called? The language of flowers.
Oh.
Oh, no.
There's a special thing, isn't that right?
Oh.
It's bonus prize if you know what it is.
Language of flowers.
The language, I'll give it to you, it's floriography.
No, I was just
floriography. I know, anything with an ology, as Maureen Lipwood would say.
No, she doesn't get a point for that.
I know, she does get a point. I got a point. You're right, so you did. Well, she was almost halfway there, because I like that. I like both of you. Floriography.
Not that I'm
and you can use flowers for saying different messages.
Yes,
so
you can, because what they stand for. So if I wanted to say, I really don't like you.
Yes.
I could say it with a flower that says that.
Oh, absolutely. And Lady Mary Wortley Montague, lovely lady. Here's a picture of her. She was the one who said there is no colour, no flower, no weeds, no herb, pebble or feather that does not have a verse belonging to it. And what happened, this was sort of taken on, there's a picture of her, she came up with this language of flowers, and you can buy a book, if you want to, by the British botanist Henry Phillips, who talks about floral emblems and what they mean and everything else.
So if you give somebody forget-me-nots, or you give them lavender, or it can mean something other than I'm just giving you a flower.
Yeah. And interesting, if you give the flowers with the right hand, it means yes. If you give it with the left hand, it means no.
Oh, right, well, there you go. Who won?
Well, I can tell you this week, today's winner is Anne. Congratulations. Wonderful stuff. Roses all round.
Thank you very much indeed.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McKibben here for the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a cold start out there in Scotland, but it is turning milder from the south this weekend. A mix of rain, showers and some sunny spells. Some sunshine to begin the day across England and Wales, but frequent showers returning into Wales and the southwest by the afternoon, staying drier further east. Meanwhile, Scotland and Northern Ireland start cloudy, but some sunshine returns to Northern Ireland and southern Scotland, whilst the rain and hill snow continues to drive in across northeast Scotland, mostly turning back to rain by the end of the day. Feeling cold here, much milder elsewhere, back in the double figures widely away from central and northern Scotland. And that rain continues to drive into northeast Scotland during Saturday night. Snow confined to the tops of the mountains. Otherwise, for much of the UK, it's a blustery night with further showers or longer spells of rain moving in from the west, a lot of cloud cover, and as a result, for most, it is frost-free, temperatures staying in the mid to high single figures in many places. We start off Sunday with a lot of cloud, some mist patches around as well. Driest towards the east, some showers feeding in from the west, but as the day goes on, actually, an increased chance of the cloud breaking and at least some brighter interludes coming through. But always there'll be outbreaks of rain and showers feeding in from the west, drier to the east and mild across the board. Mid to high single figures in the north, 11 or 12 in the south.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi, Rishi Sunak here. Join me for a special GB News People's Forum Live on Monday the 12th of February. I want to hear about the issues that matter to you. For your chance to be part of the audience and to put your questions to me, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com. See you there.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom